All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State 356 and see if you recognize that.
This is a photocopy of
Hey critters,
page 2
how
of
are
a
you?
deposit checking account statement
And that's,
in the name of Richard Alexander Murdaugh.
all right, and what does that reflect on August 6, 2021, what the balance was in his
I thought
account?
I'd watch with all of you.
Overdraft balance of $347,784.67.
It's a
what
hell
happens
of a
on August
story,
9th,
isn't it? Hey
2021?
Diane, good morning. How are
A
you?
deposit of $400,000 is made to this account.
All right, and we see after that, there's a transfer to checking of $20,000 that's done as well?
Yes, sir.
And do you know what the purpose of that transfer was?
No, sir, I don't.
So I've been watching the trial at night after work. So today I'm off, so I have a meeting, I think at 12. I'll have to
So right
look,
there,
but I have one
on
meeting,
August
but other than
6,
that,
2021,
I'm off today, so I thought
Alex's
I'd watch
account was
here
negative
with people I can talk to.
$347,000, is that correct?
I
Yes, sir.
would get your opinion.
And then off the books, Russell
Thank you,
Lafitte
DJO.
caused $400,000 to be put into his account, is that
Hey
right?
Kathy.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's talk more about that.
Yeah, so let me pause this just a second and kind of address this. Hold on. All right, so I have, like I said, I have one meeting today, but I think it's going to occur like during the lunch time that they're gone to lunch. And then I'm going to talk about narcissistic breakdown, because I think that's the motive here. I think that's what happened with Alex, is this phenomenon that is related to narcissists who are just overwhelmed by their anxiety. You have to realize that the narcissistic mask that is developed, the personality that is cultivated through years and years and years, all that cultivation is there to protect them. They recognize themselves as being completely flawed and unable to measure up to the demands of their environment. And in his case, he's got multi-generation of high levels of accomplishment, and being a big fish in a little pond, which makes him highly visible, correct? So if you're competent, if you're born into one of these families and you're intelligent and you're healthy and you're, capable of a clear thought, then you can parlay that history and that the optics, you can parlay that into quite an impressive life. Like the Kennedys, for example. Their dad stumbled into ill-gotten gains. They lived in a very small area, and so they were well known. And through the just available cash, plus the optics of being the big fish in the little pond, they were then able to secure political power, and then they took the political power national. So it can be done, and it is very often done. I mean, the Bush family is very similar. It can be done. The question is, should it be done? Just because you have a famous or accomplished parent or grandparent, does that automatically mean that you yourself, that you're going to be successful and notable and accomplished? Absolutely not, because at the end of the day, we are all dealing with some realities, and that is, number one, mental health, or personality. Did you have good attachment in childhood? Did you form a confident, relationship with the greater world? Do you trust in the world? Do you believe that people are basically good? And then, what is your level of intellect? Are you capable of understanding things like macroeconomics and tertiary conditioning, things like that? And then do you have the personality, the charisma, charm to effectively use your position of power and expectation? And so, you know, that's a unique skill set, right? Not very many people have all that going on. And so if you're one of the unfortunate children or grandchildren of these types of people, then you grow up in this bubble, this microcosm that of this message that says, don't be the failure. Don't be the one to take all this family's successes and then just be mediocre. Mediocrity is unacceptable in the world of the elite, right? It's unacceptable. And, you know, if that's not who you are, if you came into the world as an artist, a pacifist, high level empathy, whatnot, then that kind of dog eat dog world is not comfortable for you. It's not the thing that you're very good at. And so if you do manage to fulfill the requirements, then maybe you're in misery. Maybe you're doing the work because you're smart, but you're miserable because you're not being true to yourself. And so that's what ends up happening with narcissists quite often, is that they know that they don't measure up. And for most of us, thank goodness, we come from normal people, normal families. And those levels of high achievement, you know, that's not really something that's ingrained in us. We're not told, if you don't become a senator of the United States, then you're a failure. We don't grow up with that kind of foolishness. Most of us, our parents just said, hey, I want you to be happy. Do what you need to do to be happy. Pay your bills on time. Don't break the law. Be kind to your family. And that's really about the biggest expectations, right? But with narcissists, they don't measure up. They know that. And regardless of what their environment is, you think about Chris Watts, the family that he grew up in, I think there was a lot of demand for conformity. I think his mother was unbending in, I make the rules and then you and your dad follow them. And so it's kind of this matriarchal kind of subjugation. And I think that's what may be happening here with Alec Murdaugh. Is I think he grew up in this family he wasn't suited for. He couldn't live up to their demands, and he lacked the backbone to say, leave me alone. And so he just cultivated a mask. He's a good old boy. He gets along with everyone. He's agreeable. He's not going to upset anybody. He's going to be the yes man. He's going to be the guy that everybody wants to be friends with, to cover up he really wasn't a legal eagle. He really wasn't a mental giant, right? He really didn't have that kind of motivation for success. Now, what he did have a taste for was the good life. He did want the money. He did want to live up to the family name. I think for him, it was more about Murdaugh than it was about anything else. You notice the way that he talks about the kids that his kids were friends with. It's like, oh, well, their daddy was this or their daddy was that. So it's all about who are you, what do you know, right? And when all that when the narcissist has spent generations cultivating this mask, and he believes that he's built himself up to appear to be just as competent as everybody else, but he's done that through machinations, betrayal, manipulation. Then when it all falls apart, what's he going to be left with? Who's he going to be? And I believe he's been lying to his attorneys. They wouldn't even look at him the other day. So it's quite interesting. And so that I will be talking about that tonight. That's going to be Friday night. Maybe not wild speculation, but maybe psychological explanation. We'll have Friday night explanation. How's that? So I'm going to talk about this process of narcissism and big fish in a little pond and what happens when, you lose it all. So that will be tonight. But for now, I'm going to shut up. We're going to listen. And we can catch up when they have a break and whatnot.
I'm gonna show you what's been marked as Exhibit 357 to your testimony and see if you recognize that.
This is a copy of minutes of the directors of Palmetto State Bank dated August 17th, 2021.
Okay.
Yeah,
And,
the
who was the secretary
Murdaughs
for
made
these, do you
money
know?
off of running alcohol, and they've been doing illegal stuff a long time.
Ray Henderson?
That's right. He's
And were
sitting
you
down.
present for these board meetings?
I was.
All right, and these minutes accurately reflect what was discussed at the board?
Yes, sir.
And we'll turn over to the second page.
I'm so sorry, DJO.
And was there a discussion at that time about, and again, this is on August 17th, 2021, was there a discussion about loans to Richard Alexander Murdaugh?
There was.
All right.
The uber
And
wealthy
is
sundown,
there
how do they get their
a
money?
reference there of Alex's intention to sell the farm?
My husband and I work our behinds
Yes,
off,
there is.
and we had never seen even
All right, and
close
is there a
to
reference
multiple
in there
millions,
to the
right?
extent of Alex's liability in total loans?
Yes, there is. $3,544,897.
All right. And was there then a discussion of additional loans that Alec had been charged off?
Yes, there were.
Okay. And very quickly.
So this
are you familiar with
joker
two
had
entities
charged
called
off
Zero United
loans at
and
Palmetto,
I am.
and
Are those
yet they were
entities
still
associated
giving him
with Alec
money.
Murdaugh?
They are.
What does that tell you?
And are those loans that in fact the bank had charged off?
That's correct.
All right. And explain very quickly what a charge-off is without too much detail.
Well,
for
it's
these
called
folks.
money
Sure.
laundering.
In a situation where a loan is deemed non-performing to the point where the bank's executive committee and/or senior management decides that it's time to take it off the books, you charge it off. It's an accounting treatment, but it doesn't remove the obligation of the borrower, or in this case, members of the LLC, any legal obligation to repay the loan.
All right. And so Alec Murdaugh was still on the hook, required to pay those loans. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And were there real properties associated with both of those loans?
Yes, sir.
And in the event Alec Murdaugh had tried to sell those properties, would the bank expect to be paid any outstanding balance plus interest and all the rest of it?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, was Alex still paying on those
No,
notes
it
even
is
though they
not
were
in front of
charged
the
off?
jury.
He
It's
had
a
periodically,
hearing
yes.
to see if they can put it in
And so
front
the
of the
ultimate
jury.
liability to the
And this
bank
goes to
for Alec
speak to
was
motive.
somewhat larger if those are included. Is that correct?
Is
Yes, sir.
basically what this is. You know, what
There's
was his
discussion in
motive?
here about a $750,000 loan in this particular,
They want to say
board
that,
discussion. Is that
that
correct?
the house
Yes,
card
there
was
is.
falling.
and
This
this is on August
he was
12th,
trying to
2021, I
hide it.
believe. Is that right?
trying to buy sympathy, trying to
The date?
give himself some
I
time.
think it's 17th.
17th, excuse me. Had you been aware of any sort of
Moonbeam.
$750,000
Hey,
loan
Pam.
to Alec Murdaugh prior to these
Hey, Paul.
discussions coming up as you moved to the board meeting on August 17th, 2021?
Only to the extent that $750,000 loan had been referenced during the executive committee in the memo that
Hey,
was referred
Carissa.
to in my executive committee minutes.
Which would have been shortly, or a couple days before this, is that
Yes,
correct?
sir, preceding week.
All right, and at the time that the $400,000 had been dispersed back on August 9th, there was no loan paperwork in existence at that time, is that correct?
No, there was not.
All right, was that the only disbursement made pursuant to this supposed $750,000
He's getting
loan?
on
It was not the only disbursement.
All right, well, stand by for me. First packet I gave you.
Yes, Saul, I made a video saying that the case is over.
I'll show you what's been
Alec
marked
lost
as,
it.
States
As soon as the
358,
jury
see if you
heard his
recognize
voice
that.
down at the kennels, I think it was
It's
over.
a wire request form.
He thought it was over too, I
on our
think.
Standard documentation dated July 15, 2021. The Palmetto State's going to wire funds to South State Bank. The beneficiary of the wire is the Wilson Law Group, LLC, to their IOLTA account in the amount of $350,000.
$350,000 to the Wilson Law Group?
Yes, sir.
All right. And then what's the next page in this document?
are the wiring instructions to the Wilson Law Group.
And does it
That's
have
what me and
contact
Bill were
information?
talking about sundown.
Contact
It-
information is to Chris at
It's gotta be, it's gotta
wilsonlawgroup.se.com.
be
And
trafficking
is that Chris
drugs.
Wilson, the lawyer, in, South Carolina, in Bamberg, South Carolina, excuse me?
As I currently understand, yes, sir.
This is on July 15th, 2021.
Yes, sir.
$350,000 was wired to Chris Wilson.
Yes, sir.
Was there any documentation, loan application, any sort of paperwork whatsoever justifying Palmetto State Bank sending $350,000 to Chris Wilson?
No, sir.
All right. And then whose benefit was this sent for?
Alec Murdaugh's.
Alec Murdaugh's. All right, let me ask you about this, and I'm gonna put it up on the screen.
Yeah,
And right now,
there
it
are
says sender
connections to
information, and
the,
what does that say
to
right
the,
there, please?
drug
Palmetto
trade.
State Bank, LNOS.
And
All right, and can
I've
you
got a
explain
video
very
ready
quickly what
to
LNOS
do,
is, what that is?
and
It's an
work
account the
has
bank
just been really
maintains. It's
bad
called
lately.
Loans Not on System.
Okay. And should that, should this wire have listed that as the sender?
No.
And
Agreed.
explain that to the court, please.
Had
Someone
loan
with big
documents been
guns,
signed
I
that day,
think.
the sender would have been the borrower on the loan. In this case, it would have been Alec Murdaugh.
But that's not what was listed, is it?
No, sir.
Well, I'll say this, Angela. Buster's usually smiling. So Buster may know where the money is.
I'll show you what's been marked as 359 to your testimony, and see if you recognize this document.
In fact, I think this was all done for the firstborn.
This is the customer copy of the cashier's check in the amount of $400,000 that was deposited to Alec Murdaugh's checking account.
All right, and is there a sticky note on there, a copy of a sticky note?
Yes, sir, there is.
And what does it say, if you would, please?
It says Alec Murdaugh, $750,000, one share of Green Swamp Inc. stock, and the date is 7/15/21.
We're gonna talk more
Agreed,
about that in
Diane.
a minute.
Air in the spare. There you go, Kathy. Age-old problem, right? And in this case, you know, they are South Carolinian royalty. The Murdaughs are. Or they were. It's all gone now.
Yeah, it states
Oh, me
360 and
too,
361.
It's the whole kit and caboodle.
Just real quick, I'm gonna show you those and see if you recognize those.
The top document is the checking deposit slip for credited to $400,000 to be credited to account 69406092. The account holder name is Alec Murdaugh. The date is 8/9/2021. And then we see a copy of the cashier's check dated 8/9/2021 in the amount of $400,000.
All right, and then the next exhibit, 361.
Next exhibit is the debit to the Loans Not on System account in the amount of $400,000, which was the source for the cashier's check in the same amount.
And the date on those again?
8/9/2021.
And that was the same day that Norris Lafitte sent an email to the board directors asking, making an inquiry about the bank's relationship with Alec Murdaugh.
That's correct.
Just a couple more. You've already testified that there was no loan application or loan paperwork or anything like that supporting the bank disbursement already of a total of $750,000, is that right?
That's correct.
And that was a wire in July 15th for $350,000 that went to Chris Wilson, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then a $400,000 disbursement on August 9th, after Norris Lafitte sent his email to the board of directors.
Yes, sir.
That covered a negative $347,000 overdraft in Alex's account.
That's correct.
A little bit extra for some walking around. money, not the
Crazy.
50K,
It's
is that
so
correct?
crazy.
Can't answer that.
All right.
There's no
I'm going to show you what's been marked
these
as
men
it
were
states
doing with money.
362 and see if you recognize that.
This is a copy of a promissory note, commercial, single advance, loan number 6996048, in the amount of $750,750. Note dated 7/15/2021.
Just real quick, what's the $750 for?
That's a note fee we charge.
A note fee?
Yes, sir.
$750 for a $750,000 loan?
Wow.
Yes, sir.
Is that typical?
No.
Possibly in the Hampton office, yes, sir.
All right. Now,
Oh, there you
I'm gonna
go. In the Hampton
let you hold that one for a
office, they
second.
were
Look
using
at the
it
back
to
page
launder
and tell me,
money
is
in
that
the Hampton
application
office.
signed?
Yeah, a little bit of.
Yes, it
truth
is
came
signed.
out.
Who is it purportedly signed by?
Richard Alexander Murdaugh.
And what is the date on that application?
Date on the note is July 15, 2021.
All right. And is that the same day as that wire to Chris Wilson?
Yes, sir.
Have you had a chance to examine that document and look at the records of the entity for which you're the chief executive officer?
I have.
Have you had a chance to look at the loan number?
I have.
And are those loan numbers sequentially generated by your system?
They are.
And in looking at that loan number, is there any way that document could have even been in existence in July of 2021?
No, sir.
And in fact, it had to have been generated after the August 9th email and after these disbursements, is that correct?
That's correct.
I'll show you 363. Just give me 1 second while I put this on the screen. And just real quick, can you see that on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Is that the loan number, the sequential loan number you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
And Chris Wilson and Lafitte have also found plenty of trouble legally.
And then that's the signature and the date that you're talking about.
That's correct.
Bye, DJO.
All right, that last exhibit I just handed to you, can you tell me the number on the back of it?
6996048.
I'm sorry, I was talking about that number. 363, states 363. No, that was my job. I was asking you to do my job. All right, tell me what that document is, please.
It's a business purpose statement.
All right, and
It accompanied the loan, 6996048.
what is the
Correct,
supposed
Sunday.
purpose for the loan that's listed on that?
Business expenses.
Okay. See that? And again, this document's also dated 7/15/21.
That's correct.
But is this the kind of document that also would be generated along with the application that we just saw?
It would in the note documentation system, yes, sir.
All right. The application that you said could not have existed in July of 2021.
That's correct.
Let me go back. We had a reference to the board minutes.
Such a crazy, the whole thing is just crazy.
From August 17th, 2021. And there was some discussion of this particular loan at that board board meeting, is that correct?
Yes, there was.
And there had been discussion at the executive committee meeting a little bit prior to that, is that correct?
That's correct.
What was your understanding at that time from those meetings, what the collateral was supposedly for this new $750,000 loan?
There'd be a mortgage on Edisto Beach House and a share of Green Swamp stock.
And is that the green swamp that was referred to on the sticky note that we saw earlier?
Yes, sir.
And what is your understanding, though, as things developed as to whether or not that collateral actually was able to be used for this particular loan?
Certainly, the second mortgage did not exist or was not placed on the property. The property was in the name of Mrs. Murdaugh.
Okay. And what about the green swamp? Was that already collateralized?
It was cross-collateralized with other loans.
So this loan was heavily under collateralized, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Give me 1 second. There's been some discussion about whether or not an appraisal had been ordered prior to June of 2021 for this supposed $750,000 loan. Was there an appraisal that had been ordered prior to June of 2021 on the Edisto property?
There was.
Did that have anything at all to do with some sort of loan for an additional $750,000?
No, sir.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as states 364 and see if you recognize that document. It's an email, but there's an attachment.
Email from Chastity Malfris to Charles Lafitte III, who's the bank's appraisal officer, referencing 3606 Big Bay Drive, Edisto. And it's an appraisal request form dated April 22, 2021. The intended use of the appraisal is for a refinance.
Okay.
And the balance is $200,000.
All right, and so it's for a refinance. Explain what the refinance was for, if you could, to the court.
At the time, the mortgage had matured, or the mortgage loan had matured, and we needed to renew it.
All right, it had already matured, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So this was an existing debt, not any sort of new debt, and so the appraisal was because you have to renew this note that had already matured, correct?
Yes, sir.
Or it has to be paid off, one of the two.
Correct.
All right.
That's another thing that's so strange to me. All of this is mind-boggling that this amount of money is getting shuffled about and hidden, and nobody supposedly notices anything. But the other thing that I find to be just mind-blowing is this idea of just general intelligence, right? We're supposed to believe that these people are worth all these millions because they're so much smarter than we are. And yet, this guy has got a recurring loan. I mean, it looks like he's doing a variable loan rate. So that, I don't know if it was like a 3-year vehicle or what, but if you have this variable rate, then at some point you have to redo the loan if the rate gets if it gets too big, then you can go back and refinance to something that will carry a lower rate, maybe more years on the loan, something like that. My question is this: if you're moving around hundreds of thousands of dollars and you've got a property that is conceivably worth about $1 million, but you're only carrying about a $200,000 mortgage, why didn't they just pay that house off? If they pay the house off, then they also have lower taxes, right? So all that money, it had to have been for something else. That money had to have been like moving through Alec Murdaugh to someone else. Every time I look at this, I think this has to be organized crime. It has to be trafficking. There's something, it lacks common sense. The things he did were nonsensical. So, I don't know. It's very strange to me. For a guy who's moving millions around, you're a legacy family. Why are you carrying a $200,000 mortgage on $1 million property? It's just dumb.
Right, can I approach? Yes.
I can, Saul. that better? Hey, Lori.
I'm gonna show you what's been marked as, States 365 and see if you recognize that document.
Good old boys. There you go, Diane.
This was the memo summarizing, or this is a copy of the memo that summarizes the relationship of Alec Murdaugh with the bank. It was prepared and presented at the executive committee meeting.
Okay.
See, he was able to steal all this money because of his family name, that long-standing relationship between the Murdaughs and the bank.
Again, I'm gonna put that up on the screen, but this lists some of the indebtedness that Alec had to the bank that you previously described earlier,
Yes, sir.
and including the Zero United with outstanding $307,761,
Yes, sir.
and then outstanding and charged off not only Zero United but also $362,896 for Redbeard.
Yes, sir.
Redbeard.
Just a few more.
Hey, Jennifer. Oh, I'm so sorry. I had it turned down low trying to keep the birds from, bothering you guys.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 366 and see if you recognize that document.
It's a document produced from our loan accounting system, and it lists all the notes, outstanding notes in the name of Alec Murdaugh, and also co-borrower with his father, Randolph Murdaugh III.
All right, and that it lists the balances on those particular loans as of June 7th, 2021?
That's correct.
It does not include, though, the charged-off loans, Zero United and Redbeard, is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, are you going to tell us the grand total?
So on the first one, is that the balance right there, $104,119.80?
That's the principal owed, yes, sir.
That's the principal owed. These are not deposits, correct?
That's correct.
Owed by who?
I think for the 104,000 was Williams Islands.
Right, but I mean, what borrower owed those?
That would have been Mr. Murdaugh, Alec Murdaugh, yes.
All right, and then this next one, what's the balance on that? How much is owed for this loan?
$806,666.26.
The next one, how much is owed for this loan?
$195,171.64.
How much is owed for this loan?
$999,650.94.
Damn.
This is actually $1 million line of credit, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
It's pretty much maxed out, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
shit. What in the hell was he doing with all that money?
And then finally, this one right here, what's the balance on that?
$91,368.90.
That was a small one.
More.
91,000 was easy to overlook that one. One, two. We're at about $2.5 million he's carrying in active loans right now. That's not the charged off loans. Yeah, well, I had this little pill problem, and street cost is kind of high. Harpoolian. It's easy for you because you just go buy your Maker's Mark, but I gotta have Lortab. It's kind of hard to come up
Last
with.
set of documents here. I'm going to show you what's been marked as states. Stand by for me real quick.
It is amazing, Diane. It's jaw-dropping, unbelievable. Bill wondered about the gambling, Kathy. I don't know. I think they were trafficking
I'll
drugs.
show you states
I think he got
367,
into a
see
bad
if you,
debt with one of the big guys from South
recognize
America.
that document.
It's a copy of a bank statement, Alec Murdaugh farm account,
And what is the balance of that on June 7th, 2021?
June 7, 2021, shows a deficit balance of $2,458.23.
Negative balance?
Yes, sir.
Show you what's been marked as 368, and do you recognize that?
Again, it's a checking account statement, Richard Alexander Murdaugh for account 6092.
All right, can you tell me what the balance was on June 7th, 2021?
$2,185.23.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as states 369, and see if you recognize that.
This is a, again, statement for a health savings account, 3094, in the name of Richard Alexander Murdaugh.
All right, and what's the balance on that?
$7,540.61.
And that's a health savings account?
Yes, sir.
Can that be used for any purpose or only for legitimate medical purposes?
I think the latter, the medical purposes.
I'll show you what's been marked as states 370 and see if you recognize that.
Again, a bank statement, copy of a bank statement in the name of Alec Murdaugh, account number 6649. And the balance on 6/7 would have been $62,115.06.
All right, and then finally 371, if you could, tell me if you recognize that.
This is a account statement, interest checking account in the name of Margaret Maggie Murdaugh and Alex Murdaugh, number 5109, and the balance on 6/7, $3,900.04.
Just have a couple more questions for you, for the purposes of this hearing at least. It's fair to say that of June of 2021 and the months after, the indebtedness to Palmetto State Bank from Alec Murdaugh was very, very large.
Yes, sir.
And it's fair to say it also had charged off loans in the past, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
If it had come out at any particular time, from let's say 2010 on, up to June of 2021, or at any time, that Alec Murdaugh had been stealing money from his partners or stealing money from his clients, would this bank have continued to loan him money?
No, sir.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
By the defense.
Yes, Your Honor, briefly.
Hey, Vicky Carpenter, welcome.
Mr. Malinowski, on June 7th, 2021, Mr. Murdaugh was not overdrawn at Palmetto State Bank, correct?
No, well,
Yeah. Farm
June
account.
7,
Yes, sir.
do you have his bank statement?
Well, we just went through them.
Right.
The
Well,
farm account's
There was
overdrawn.
one statement, the farm account was minus $2,045. There was another account that was plus $2,185, according to Exhibit 368. His health savings account, Exhibit 369, had $7,540. Exhibit 370 had a positive balance of $62,000 and some change. And then Maggie's account, Exhibit 371, had $3,904.
Yes, sir.
So there's one account that was
Overdrawn.
overdrawn for $2,000, but positive balances in all the other.
Yes, sir.
And Alec Murdaugh had been a customer of Palmetto State Bank for many, many years, is that correct?
That's correct.
And had he ever been denied a request from Palmetto State Bank for a line of credit or a loan up until September of 2021?
To my knowledge, no.
Okay. And in July of 2021, apparently he got a $750,000 loan that was approved according to the documents here by 3 members of the board of directors. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Lafitte, Wilson, and
If I can find that.
I didn't get the third person. And the people that approved it, by the way, have been arrested. Or at least Lafitte has.
Here it is.
That, it was the ultimate game of robbing Peter to pay Paul,
Is that
yeah.
one?
He never paid the loan off, he just got new loans, right?
Can you see the highlighted language
It
there?
was complete graft.
I can see the highlighted language, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And this is.
Doesn't
this
mean
is
he was a
from-
good,
Be sure we know
steward.
what we're talking about. Minutes of the Board of Directors meeting, August 17th, 2021, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And here, says Chairman Lafitte reviewed the loans to Richard Alexander Murdaugh. Russell Lafitte stated that his intention is to sell the farm. We have mortgages on the properties that supersede the property being transferred into Maggie's name. Now, what does that mean? Tell me about that. You have mortgages on the property that superseded the property being transferred to Maggie's name. Do you remember that?
I guess it would reference the mortgages, the date of the mortgage and the date they were recorded on previous loans.
So at some point in time, Alec transferred the Moselle property into Maggie's name.
It's my understanding, yes.
And before that date, your bank already had a mortgage on the property.
Yes, sir.
He was desperate, critters. I think you're exactly right.
Moselle property here?
He was frantically trying to save what he had, stolen, I
If you're
guess.
referring to the farm, I'm assuming he's referring to Moselle, yes, sir.
Okay. Then, at the last sentence of this paragraph, it says, Elizabeth Malinowski commented the $750,000 loan did not appear to have been approved by the executive committee. Russell Lafitte explained that 3 of the 5 members approved the loan. Do you recall that?
I recall it, yes, sir.
And who are the 3 of the 5 members of the executive committee that approved the loan?
It would have been Charlie Lafitte, Ray Henderson, and Russell Lafitte.
And do you recall Charlie Lafitte telling you at some point in time, maybe around in here or even before, that if Alec Murdaugh wanted to receive a loan from the bank, that he would get it?
That was Mr. Lafitte's opinion, yes.
Wow.
And
Wow.
who was Mr. Lafitte in relation to the bank in June of 2007?
2007?
Excuse me, June 7th, 2021.
He was chairman of the bank.
Okay.
Crazy,
And-
crazy.
Was Russell Lafitte related to Mr. Lafitte?
His son.
And who are the members of the executive committee?
The executive committee, Charlie Lafitte, Ray Henderson, Russell Lafitte, Scott Swain, and myself.
And so, Mr. Lafitte, Charlie Lafitte's opinion was if Alec Murdaugh wanted a loan from the bank, he would get it. Is correct?
That was his opinion.
And on the $750,000 loan he was provided, apparently without a lot of paperwork done on the front end, but it was approved by Mr. Lafitte, his son, Russell Lafitte, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And his daughter, Gray Henderson, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Golly. Wow, that's the daughter. I had no idea. Good Lord. That's Palmetto State Bank.
And you mentioned that there was some, in June of 2021, there was some $4.2 million or something outstanding. I don't have the exact number, but maybe we can find that. Do you know how much was secured and unsecured when you reviewed the indebtedness?
Do you have a document I can
I
refer
will,
to?
Jackie.
I'm trying to find it. Hold on.
Wow, I cannot wrap my head around this.
I'm gonna put it on the screen here.
Why is this family giving him so much money?
You may be talking about the same document we looked at, and I have the highlighted language. It says here, well, let's just refer to it says Norris Lafitte had found a mathematical error which will be corrected to $3,544,897. Total loans, and those are total loans to Mr. Murdaugh, is that correct?
That must be with the
According to
charge-offs.
another memo that came.
That must have been charge-offs that they
As to
added
this
in.
amount, how much was it all secured?
Without seeing the memo, I couldn't tell. If you've got the memo, I'll certainly go down the loans.
I don't have the memo, I only have,
So it changes things a
Well,
little
forgot.
bit if all the loans were secured. If all the loans were secured, then it changes just a little bit in terms of you think about him and his frame of mind and his motivation, because what he's doing basically is squandering his family's fortune, right? That he had land that had been gifted to him, and so he gets this land or these houses free of charge from family holdings, and then he turns around and takes the land that's paid off. He doesn't owe anybody for it, but then he goes and he gets a loan for the value of the land. He's just now given that chunk of family land to the bank. So he's just dumb. I think he's just, I bet his IQ is 100, you know? And not that that's dumb. I mean, that's the average IQ. But I mean, we all think when we look at a family like this, we think, oh, they're got superior intellect and they're intelligent and they're driven and they're so much better than we are. And in reality, he's just a goon. He's just making goofball, basic error, you know? Strange. And maybe that's why the bank was willingly given all this money, is maybe they wanted their land. Maybe they wanted to own the land. They knew he would default.
for the indebtedness, Mr. Murdoch. And I am referring to Exhibit 365.
Can you pull down that memo? There we go, thank you.
I'll be right back.
Can you read that?
Yes, sir.
Try to zoom it in without putting too many shadows on it. And so we went through that. Is that the collateral for those loans?
As stated in the memo, yes.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that some loans have been written off. Are you aware that Mr. Murdaugh was still paying on the loans that had been written off?
Yes, sir, I was.
And you mentioned that, and had Mr. Murdaugh always paid the bank interest, monies he owed? And did he ever go in default? And let's put it like, did he ever go in default on any notes issued to him by Palmetto State Bank?
Redbeard and Zero United?
And those were the ones that were written off,
Yes, sir.
but he continued to pay those, correct?
He periodically made payments, yes, sir.
Are you aware that on the day Maggie Murdaugh was murdered sometime the night of June the 7th? Are you aware that she was scheduled to meet your appraiser at Edisto on June the 8th?
No, sir.
The Moselle property was titled in Maggie Murdaugh's name in June of 2021, correct?
I believe that's correct.
The bank had filed mortgages on the property that predated whenever that was transferred to Ms. Murdaugh, right?
Yes, sir.
The Edisto Beach House was titled in jointly in Alec Murdaugh and Maggie Murdaugh's names, correct?
At one point,
Before her death.
I believe it was in her name solely at the time of her death.
You do? Are you sure about that?
I believe so.
And what information are you relying upon to say that?
Looking at the Colleton County deed records.
One second, Your Honor. Undergo routine FDIC audits, Palmetto State Bank?
Yes, sir.
And had Mr. Murdaugh's relationship with the bank ever been flagged in any audit conducted by the FDIC or their contract auditors?
To my knowledge, no.
That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Mr. Malinowski, just a few more questions. May it please the court. Get that 365 back that we were just looking at. This is that memo that was prepared for the
Did I miss anything important?
board meetings, correct?
This was the one that was prepared for the executive committee.
And what does it say right there at the bottom, the purpose that's being reported that the $750,000 is for?
To remodel of the house in Edisto.
Does it say anything about sending $350,000 to Chris Wilson to try to make up the funds that he had diverted from his law firm?
No, sir.
Does it say anything about $400,000 to cover a $347,000 overdraft?
No, sir.
After June 7th was the first significant activity from the bank to Alec to provide that $350,000 off the books with no application whatsoever.
Yes, sir.
And after June the 7th, did his account run to negative $347,000?
Yes, sir.
And the bank kept paying?
Yes, sir.
Perhaps the most generous overdraft policy ever seen.
Yeah.
Quite possibly.
No, not quite possibly.
You were asked a little bit about Zero United and Redbeard, which are up on the screen. The bank did not foreclose on those properties, is that correct?
That is correct.
So Alec Murdaugh still owned those properties, correct?
He and partners, yes, sir.
All right, but if he were to try to sell them, could he have sold them without having to account to the bank?
He would have had to pay back the monies he had borrowed from the bank.
And we see that, we up on that screen, what happened to my exhibit? Back in 365. If he had tried to sell those properties, would he have just had to pay the bank those amounts listed there, or could it potentially be much higher than that?
Potentially much higher.
And explain to the court very quickly why it could be much higher than that he would have to satisfy before he could sell those properties.
There would be accrued interest and any late charges and fees that accumulated since the date of the charge-off.
Once y'all charged it off, it no longer was accruing interest and penalties and fees on the books at least, correct?
Yes, sir.
But if you were to, if he was to try to sell that property and the buyer came to you or to see how much they needed to pay y'all out of the proceeds before title could transfer, y'all would go back and look at all that interest that hadn't been paid over that time.
Yes, we provide a payoff statement which would have included principal, accrued interest or lost interest to that date, and any late fees and charges.
And he would be unable to sell those properties and transfer title until some arrangement was reached with the bank.
Yes, sir.
We just, you were just asked about whether or not Maggie was going to be meeting an appraisal at the Edisto property, but you've testified in no uncertain terms that that appraisal was to renew the mortgage that was already in existence that had matured, correct?
Yes, sir.
It had nothing to do with a new 750.
Yes, sir.
We just talked about the negative $347,000 overdraft policy, correct?
Yes, sir.
In 2 months, his account went to negative $347,000.
Yes, sir.
Good God, I can't get my mind around that.
If it had come out that Alec Murdaugh had been diverting fees from his law firm, if Alec Murdaugh had been forced to resign from his law firm, if it had come out that he had been misappropriating money from his clients, would the bank have continued to pay charges coming in on that account?
No, sir.
No.
No, sir.
No uncertain terms about that.
No uncertain terms.
So all this testimony about the relationship in the bank, if the truth had come out, it's a new ball game, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in the wake of all of this, Russell Lafitte was terminated and you became CEO, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And now there's a new sheriff in town at Palmetto State Bank, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Lafitte has been arrested and found
Mr.
guilty.
Malinowski, how much in interest did Alec Murdaugh
Thanks,
pay to
Omar.
Palmetto State Bank over the years?
Me
don't know.
too.
Excess of $4 million, isn't it?
I don't have a figure.
Thank you.
You may step down.
Thank you.
It's just mind blowing, you know, that,
Let me call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
you know, the rich and
Well,
the rich and famous, right? I mean, that's what everybody aspires to. It's what everybody thinks. You know, oh, I want to be rich. I want to live like they live. I want to have all those 4-wheelers and boats and big houses and, you know, want. Well, I don't know about you, but there's basically a mortgage is about the only debt that most people really carry, right? I mean, there are some people that use credit cards and, you know, but overall, your biggest cost is your house. And then the majority of working people are driven to pay off that mortgage because that's safety. If you have a place that's paid off that you can live, it doesn't have to be a big fancy place. It just has to be a place that's yours and you're safe. And you don't, in old age, you don't live in danger of somebody, the bank coming and taking it, right? This kind of money I would go insane with worry to have so much leverage to not own anything, none of it be mine, all of it really essentially be owned by the bank, right? And that it's all based on my continued position with the family firm. I would be a nervous wreck. There's no freedom there. How do you make the decision of, well, I think I want to, move to Florida and practice for a year, or I think I'll go live in Colorado for a year and work. You don't have that chance because you're basically being held hostage by the name association. Because the guy just said, if he's not employed by the Murdaugh family firm, then he doesn't get any more special treatment. It wasn't Alec that was getting the special treatment. It was the Murdaugh legacy. I can't. I would never trade. I'll tell you what. I would never trade all that debt and the stress on top of you for being able to have tons of toys and lots of, spending. To go into debt is a terrifying thought for me. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a debt. Most of us can't pay cash for a large house, but, whew, I mean, I have the freedom if I wanted to quit work and go back to work as a teacher. My bills are a fraction of what I make. For safety too. I mean, we really live a really humble life. We don't do all this, jet setting and spending. It's just a scary thing. I don't know how anybody gets himself in this situation. It's terrifying. Anybody else scared about it? Think about it. If the idea of living under that much debt, put a 1. If you wish that you could carry that kind of debt, put a 2. I'm with you, Diane. Even if the bank would give me $3+ million in loans, I would never take it. Not in 10,000 years. No way. When the whole the PPP money came out, right? There were a lot of people, Barry Morphew is one of them. There were a lot of people that scammed our government saying, oh, I have this business and these employees and I need, $50,000 to pay my employees over the COVID. What we chose to do in our family is we figured out, okay, how do we cut out spending? Like, how do we make it on what we're bringing in, keep our savings intact, and not take money from the government. And the other part too was don't quit paying your mortgage, because a lot of people quit paying their mortgage and they didn't know that that mortgage was going to come due, that additional payments would come due. And so a lot of people were really shocked several months ago when they had to start paying all that back. We were just like, no, we'll just cut things out. We're not going to be going out to eat. We're going to, eat breakfast for dinner. All those
State calls
tricks that
Tony
my parents
Satterfield.
taught me, right? You try to conserve and not go into debt is really the big focus. And the way our government spends, which is the same kind of idea as what this family's doing. The government is just put this country in so much debt. I don't know how we ever get out of it. And then it's just scares me to death to think about it. It really does. I do too, Jennifer. I like being
My name
able
is Michael
to sleep.
Satterfield. My last name is spelled Satterfield.
How you doing today?
Good, how are you?
All right. Hold
Okay,
that mic
this
to you
is
just
the
a little bit
baby.
closer so we
This
can hear
is
you
the
guys.
maid's son.
How old are you?
I'm 33.
All right. Where do you work?
I work at Beaufort Memorial Hospital
Okay. And where'd you grow up?
in Hampton.
For the purposes of this hearing, we're just on a hearing in front of the judge to determine the admissibility of some testimony. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions, not everything I might ask you if we were in front of the jury. You
And I
understand that?
think she
Speak
was
up
the
for us, 'cause
first
the court order and everybody needs to
victim
hear you.
of the money scam.
Who was your mother?
Gloria Satterfield.
Gloria Satterfield?
Yes.
And Is Gloria still with us?
She's not.
And when did she pass?
February 26, 2018.
2018?
Yes, sir.
And who did she work for when she passed?
Alex and Maggie Murdaugh.
Okay. And do you know Alec Murdaugh?
I do.
Do you see him here in the courtroom today?
I do.
Can you point him out?
Yes, right there.
Okay. Your Honor, can the record reflect he's identified the defendant?
Yeah, you know what you did, sucker.
I mean, it's in camera.
Yeah, where is he? Where is he?
What was that, sir? I'm sorry.
Pardon?
Point him out again if you
Oh,
would, please.
right there.
All right.
Right,
Can you tell me what jacket he's wearing?
A navy blue jacket.
it does.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Look at the disdain on Alex's face. He's like, you have no right to sit
How long
in
did
judgment
your
of me."
mom, roughly, how long she worked for Alec? Do you know?
I had to take an estimate, I guess, 20-something years, maybe, give and take. I don't know the exact years.
Hey, C922.
And set up just a little bit more. and you can talk
Hey,
right
day
into that
tripper.
mic. There you go. Just a little bit. You need to get up on
Yeah,
the mic so
Chris
we can
Wilson
hear
was
you.
awesome.
All right. What did your mom do for Alec?
She was their housekeeper. She babysat for them. She cleaned their house, and kind of anything else they kind of need.
Exactly.
Okay. Has she been doing that for a long time?
Yes.
During the course of that, you got to know Alec and his family to some extent as well?
Yes.
Hi, Deucey Doo.
Did you trust Mr. Murdaugh?
Yes.
What happened to your mom?
She fell and hit her head.
Okay, and where was she when that happened?
That's
She was
wonderful,
at
Juicy
Alex's house
Doo.
in Moselle.
In Moselle?
Yes.
Did she pass right away or did she live for a while?
She lived for a few weeks.
Hey,
Was she
Beans,
ever
your
able
mom.
to say to you what happened, how she fell or anything?
No, she was not.
After she passed, did you have any conversation with Alec about what to do about it?
I did.
And what was the conversation you had with Alec?
I
What did he say?
barely,
Go ahead.
I barely remember, but it's like, let me go after my insurance company for this or whatever, kind of get these medical bills and stuff paid.
Okay, so he said he was gonna go after his insurance company
Yes.
and get medical bills for your mom paid?
Yes.
Did he say he might get any of that money for you and your brother?
Yes.
Did he say how much that might be?
No.
Ultimately, was there a lawsuit filed?
Yes.
And who did you consider your lawyer was in all of this?
Alex.
At some point in time, did he bring another lawyer in?
Yes.
And what did he tell you about that?
He said, if I understood it correctly, I can't do it myself because conflict of interest. I'm going to send you to my buddy, Corey Fleming.
Corey Fleming?
Yes.
Did he tell you anything about your relationship with Corey Fleming other than they were buddies?
Can you repeat the question? I'm trying to hear you.
Did he tell you anything more about his relationship with Corey Fleming?
No.
After he
I'll
brought
be
in
right
Corey
back.
Fleming, were you still communicating directly with Alec about the case?
Yes.
Who did you think your lawyer was
Alex.
the whole time?
Yes.
Did he ever bring in a person, or did they ever bring in a person by the name of Chad?
Yes.
And you remember Chad's last name?
Westendorf.
Okay. And what did they tell you about Chad?
That he should be my PR.
Your PR?
Yes.
Did you ever meet with Chad?
Yes.
Did you meet with him a lot or just?
One time I can think of.
Alec told you that he was going after his insurance company. Did he say how much that insurance was?
One of them that I know of was like $500,000, and that's the only one.
That's the only one he told you about?
Yes.
Did he ever tell you that there was also an umbrella policy worth upwards of $5 million?
No.
Never mentioned that to you, did he?
No.
Course indulgence, one moment. I'll show you what's been marked as states 372 to your testimony and just have you take a look at that. And do you recognize that document?
Yes.
And tell me what that is.
That is a cover sheet that I faxed that I sent him, Alex.
Okay, and what's the reason that you sent that to Alec?
I got something from the trailer company and a medical bill, I believe, and I just wanted to be sure what I needed to do with it.
You had received some paperwork about your mom?
It was a bill,
It was a bill?
yeah.
And who did you send that to?
Alex Murdaugh, or the law firm.
All right, and why did you send it to Alec Murdaugh?
Cause he said if we got any medical bills, just forward them to him, and I didn't know if I needed to do anything with it.
Because you thought he was your lawyer?
Yes,
All right, and this had your phone number on there, but we blacked it out, correct?
yes.
As time went on, did you have conversations with Alec asking him about the case and what was going on with the case or anything like that?
Yes, not very rarely, but every few months or so.
All right, and what would he tell you, just generally over the month?
First it was hard, and he knows like it was making progress, and he kind of left it at that.
He said it was hard, but they were making progress?
Yes.
Did he tell you anything about whether or not you and your brother were to get any money after the medical
he
bills were paid?
said he was hoping.
All right, did he give you any idea of the amount?
If I remember correctly, one time he said he's trying to get each of you at least $100,000 apiece.
Each of you, you and your
Yes.
brother?
Yes.
At some point in time, did your family advise you that there was some media reporting about a settlement in the case?
Yes.
All right, and at that time, had you heard anything from Alec or Corey or Chad or anybody about a settlement in the case?
No.
All right, and what, if anything, did you do after your family, did they ask you to do anything?
Yeah, they said you might want to kind of follow up on it and kind of see.
And did you make a phone call to Alec?
Yes.
All right, and what month was that in?
I believe the last time I talked to him was in June of 21.
June of 21?
Yes.
Around the time of the murders?
Yes.
And what did you ask him?
I can't believe what I asked him, but it was still making progress and be ready to settle, by the end of the year.
He told you it was still making progress and he was hoping to settle by the end of the year.
Yes.
Did he tell you that they had already gotten a settlement for $505,000?
No.
Did he tell you that they had already gotten a settlement for $3.8 million?
No.
Had he ever told you that there was an umbrella policy for $5 million?
No.
Did he ever mention to you anything about forge?
No.
Did he mention anything to you about structuring any settlement?
No.
Did you give him permission to steal your money?
No.
So sad, isn't it?
Ultimately, in the wake of all of this, you've come to find out that there was a settlement for $505,000, correct?
Yes.
My
And it
God.
was diverted by Alec Murdaugh, correct?
Yes.
And ultimately, you've come to find out that there was a settlement under the umbrella policy for $3.8 million, is that
Ye-
correct?
yes.
Or thereabouts, correct?
Yes.
And a large proportion of that was diverted by Alec Murdaugh, is that right?
Yes.
Did you ever get 1 cent from Alec Murdaugh when he was still, before all of this happened?
No.
Wow.
So after this happening, and it took a legal process for that to happen, is that right?
Yes.
And ultimately, is it your understanding that he confessed judgment to taking money for both of those, is that
Yes.
right? In June of 2021, you made a call to him asking the status of this case, is that correct?
I can't remember if he called me or if I called him, but yes, I talked to him in June 2021.
You talked to him in June of 2021?
Yes.
And there were reports in the media about that settlement, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, thank you. And please answer any questions the defense has, okay?
By the defense.
Alec Murdaugh is a gross human being. Can we all agree? If you believe that Alex Murdaugh is disgusting, put a 1.
You had a family member who saw an article in somewhere. Do you remember where that article was published?
I don't remember exactly where they found it at or seen it at.
Okay, but after that article was published, that's when you started making inquiries and you contacted Mr. Murdaugh?
Yes, once they seen the article or whatever, they were like, you need to follow up on it, and, yes, and I can't remember if he called me or if I called him.
And do you know whether you called him on the cell phone?
It was on his cell phone normally, that's how I called him, yes.
So you called him on the cell phone?
Yes.
Okay, and his cell phone record would reflect, how many times did you call him?
What was that?
How many times did you call him?
Like, once, twice, three, we talked like 3 or 4 times, throughout the whole year, if I remember correctly.
And when you called him after reading some article about a settlement, do you know if that was before or after Maggie and Paul were murdered?
It was around the time, but I don't remember if it was before or after.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you,
that
you
was-
missed that thing.
Those were the questions? He's like, I give up. My client's a piece of, you know what? Alec Murdaugh, no empathy.
Your Honor, can we have just a very quick break to get the exhibits ready for that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
We'll take 5 minutes or so.
Yay, there are going to be exhibits on this one. I bet Alec is really looking forward to this this next presentation. What the world? Okay. So, Murdaugh, we have multiple possibilities here. Okay. It could be that he's just under intense stress, right? Because of the financial shell game that he's playing. In some ways, he was like a poor man's Bernie Madoff, right? I mean, it wasn't that people were giving him money to invest, but he's supposed to be earning fees, and rather than following the business plan, the C Corp's arrangement, he begins interceding those payments that should by all. He's an employee of the corporation. They should not have been giving him the cash. The cash should have been going directly into the business, and then it was up to the business to disperse his income. And there's no doubt that everybody understands he's moving all this money around. He's frantically doing things that are very crazy because he's gotten into this weird situation with the bank, and he's just completely dug himself into a hole. And I don't think Maggie Murdaugh knew how bad the situation was financially. And the big question, though, I think that all of us have, right? Oh, yeah, crocodile tears for sure. The big question that we have, we're not asking what was the motive. I think we all get the motive, right? The motive is clear at this point. He had completely destroyed any hope of any kind of recovery from the hole that he had dug himself into. And his family was not doing that much better. His brother talks about that there's not much available money for taking care of Buster. But I think the question that we all have is, what the hell did he do with all this money? Now, they don't have to show what he was doing with it, right? He's Shadow of Lotus, welcome. They don't have to show what he did with it. They don't have to, the motive doesn't, well, they don't even really technically have to show motive in the case of murder, but they got motive here. Like, the time frame for when all of this frantic movement, stealing and whatnot, it all culminated right around the time of the death, correct? And it does seem to have begun, the weird money machinations does seem to have started with Satterfield. And maybe that was the first taste that he had of, I can steal if the people being awarded these large settlements, if they're not very sophisticated, They live a very simple life. They don't really have access to attorneys and that kind of thing. I could dole out a little bit of cash at a time and really use the big bulk of their settlement to make investments of my own. I take the profit and then put the money back into the settlement fund, right? And I'm guessing that's what they had in mind. I think I don't think that he ever believed he was going to be able to take the whole principle of the nest egg, the settlement money, and nobody would know. I think he knew, but he's on borrowed time. It's like he's being his own bank. He's taking their money, he's using it to make an investment, and then when he turns it over for a profit, he keeps the profit put to their original money back in the settlement, and they're never the wiser. They don't ever know that he did it. I think that was the original thought. That's certainly not how it turned out, but I think that would explain a lot of the actions that he did. Then he got the bank involved trying to cover his butt as he's trying to recoup his losses. But with the question that I'm having right now, and I think some of you guys, why? Where was the money? Like, what's he doing? That's an incredible amount of money. Where is it? This is not, if it's gambling debts, it's unbelievable gambling debts. I mean, it's kind of psychotic, strange, off the wall levels of gambling debt. So I'm not sure that it's gambling, but one thing that I had in my mind was, what if he decided he was going to get into the drug trafficking trade, and then he's able to buy a large sum of whatever drug he's trafficking. He's able to buy a large sum of that, and then the cops get the drugs. So even though he paid for the drugs, they never make it to him for distribution. Then what happens? Well, then he is out a great deal of money if he was a dumbass enough to use, mortgages and borrowed money to buy drugs to sell. It's just it's just a crazy thought. Now, Diane is saying probably money hidden overseas. The problem with the money hidden overseas is that it's really not hidden anymore. Even Switzerland, which was really like one of the last places that you could have a bank account that wouldn't get reported to the IRS, even that has changed now with Switzerland. There are a lot of people that will go like to a third world country, let's say Egypt, because that's what I know. They'll go to Egypt, they'll find somebody willing to open up a bank account for them. They'll pay the money to the guy for opening up the bank account, but then the money that's in the bank account is not his. He doesn't have access, he doesn't have a card, he doesn't have any way to get into the money. The bank is corrupt, and so they willingly do this with a lot of like Western businesses and stuff. So I don't know. There's ways to do it, but it's not like it used to be. This whole what they call New World Order, where we don't really have individual countries, we're all kind of interconnected. That's pretty much made it hard to hide. It's made it hard to run away to another country to avoid arrest. It's made it hard to hide money in your name. It's hard to do. They do claim that one of the best ways to hide your money is through land purchase. That remains, an effective way. But I don't know. It's just crazy. And Murdaugh owns a lot of land. So, I don't know. It just seems like organized crime to me. What do y'all think? Write into the comments what do you think? Is it drugs? Is it gambling? Is it organized crime? Is he just a dumbass and spending and not aware of how much he's spending? I can't believe that's true. Do you know how hard it is to spend $1 million? Well, now if you're well, I'm not gonna say that. We are in the Scruff area in South Carolina. Something tells me he hid. So, oh, I think he definitely tried to put money away for Prince Buster. Buster's gonna need a little money because, you know, we've heard the phone calls and Buster's not very good at taking care of himself, right? Okay, well, look, Alec, Buster is as capable as anyone else for taking care of himself. But it does seem strange when you listen to the phone calls between Alec Murdaugh and Buster when they're in jail, or when he's in jail. It is odd, isn't it, the way he talks to him? That he's a grown man. He's got a job. His wife is an attorney, and somebody's worried about giving money to Buster. Why? DJO says, hell, I'm not going to have any trouble spending $1 million. You can find you a nice little racehorse for $1 million. All right, so, I don't know. This crazy story, we may never know what caused him to start playing with money like this. We might not ever know. Maybe we will. Maybe it'll come out. Maybe he knows his goose is cooked, and they're going to put him on the stand, and he's going to say, I'm sorry, I was in it. The mob came for me. Here, they drove up. This is what happened. I didn't do it on purpose. He might, you know. I mean, this is wild speculation Friday. So, you know, let's get crazy with the what ifs, should haves, and could haves, because this definitely is not a story. I mean, would you even have made up this story for a Hollywood blockbuster movie? It's just so crazy. And yes, I do think it will come out. Someone will make a movie about this story. I surely do. We do not have sound. Why have we no sound?
Do you affirm the testimony about the court shall give the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Another redhead. There's lots of redheads in South Carolina, people.
Spell your
Not
last
sure
name,
what that's
please.
about, but there's a lot of them. Another ginger.
Carson Burney, Burney.
Morning, Mr. Burney.
Good morning.
Still morning, just barely.
It is-
Where do you work, Mr. Burney?
I work for the South Carolina Attorney General's office.
And what is your job and title at the
An
South Carolina
impressive
Attorney General's
ginger.
office?
I am the forensic accountant in the state grand jury division.
All right, and how long have you been a
He's the one
forensic
that
accountant?
uncovered all the secrets.
Approximately a year and a half.
All right, and what do you do as a forensic accountant for the state grand jury?
As a forensic accountant, I identify, compile, analyze different financial records to include bank statements, credit card statements, loan documents. I also trace assets from source
Fun.
to ultimate disposition.
Fun.
All right, and what did you do prior to serving as a forensic accountant for the state grand jury?
In 2019, I joined the South Carolina Department of Revenue as a sales tax auditor, and I was there for a little over 2 years.
There are a variety of other niceties, but because it's an in-camera hearing, we'll cut straight to the chase. As a forensic accountant for the state grand jury division, have you reviewed any documents in relation to a Richard Alexander Murdaugh?
I have
And what sorts of documents have you reviewed in relation to that gentleman?
similar documents, as I mentioned earlier. They would include bank statements, loan documents, wire information, money orders, and other various things.
And what were you asked to do in relation to those documents?
I was asked to trace the alleged stolen funds and ultimately show where the disposition of those funds ended up.
Now, you said trace. What is tracing from a 10,000-foot view?
Tracing is simply just following a fund. In this example, these are the alleged stolen checks. Primarily that went to forge account, and following the money through to see where exactly it was ultimately spent out of those accounts.
And so in analyzing records and in coordination with law enforcement, were specific instruments identified and asked of you to trace where their ultimate disposition was?
I was.
Now, when we say ultimate disposition, can you follow that same dollar forever and ever onto eternity, or is there sort of a line where you have to just draw it and stop and say that's as far as we can go?
You have to draw a line. Obviously, you could follow money forever, forever, and forever, but for the purposes of my analysis, I looked at when they ultimately went out of an account controlled by Alex Murdaugh.
Did you also draw any lines when they went into any sort of loan statement or credit card statement or anything like that?
That's correct. If it was a credit card payment or a loan payment, I would stop there for that particular trace.
And have you prepared documents reflecting the conclusions that you reached upon tracing those funds?
I have.
All right, and just very briefly, there's a variety of different ways to trace money, is that correct?
That is correct.
And just very quickly, which methodology did you apply in tracing the funds?
Right, so you do have to have some rules when you are tracing funds to stay consistent. So the method I used was a first in, first out method.
And what is the first in, first out method?
It's exactly like the name implies. The first money into an account would be the first money out of an account.
I'm showing you a document that has been labeled for the purposes of this in-camera proceeding as it states Exhibit 373. Very briefly, do you recognize this document?
I do.
What is it?
This is a tracing of funds regarding the $792,000 with the Ferris case.
May I please have the honor? And Mr. Birdie, can you see that?
I can.
All right. And so explain very briefly here at the top, what is this green table at the top?
The green table at the top indicate the three instruments I was tracing. So the first being a check in the amount of $192,000 with a date or a negotiated date of March 10th, 2021. Second, a $375,000 instrument that was ultimately negotiated on March 23rd, 2021. And the last is a instrument in the amount of $225,000 that was ultimately negotiated on April 20th, 2021. And there you can see the bank number, account number that it was deposited into.
And what were the last four digits of that bank account that it was deposited into?
6779.
And what was the descriptive holder of that account?
Alex Murdaugh.
And what's that next column, the from column?
The from column is where the check was from, and you can see it was a Wilson Law Group IOLTA account.
And in preparing this document, did you have to review a considerable amount of bank records in order to prepare it?
A lot of bank records.
A
Yes,
lot
sir.
of bank records?
Yes, sir.
And specific instruments, correct?
That is correct.
All right, and down here below, what is this blue table?
The blue table is a pivot table, which is just a summary in Excel. That shows the ultimate disposition of where that money went, and you can see at the bottom, it will total out to the initial amount of money that went in.
All right, and not to call out any too many specific transactions because we are in an in-camera hearing, but we have here, for example, C.E. Smith, $507,561.63, and then the number 26 next to that. Can you briefly explain what those different columns stand for?
So the first column, you can see where it came out of the bank account. Those descriptors are what was written on the check or what was done with the check, as you can see with cash withdrawal. And then the total amount is in the total column. And then finally, you have the number of checks in the last column.
And then another name that we have here is what appears to be the name of an attorney in the amount of $150,000. Am I reading that correctly?
That is correct.
And then we have it broken down into two separate subsections. What is the distinction between those two different subsections?
Just different bank accounts where the money was ultimately disposed. Money would transfer from one bank account to another bank account. So I try to differentiate those two different accounts.
And I jumped ahead of myself a little bit getting into this first tracing exhibit, but just generally speaking, upon your review of all of the different bank accounts associated with Alex Murdaugh, what was the general flow of funds? Did they primarily go into one bank account, or did they go into one bank account and then into others, or how did it work?
So with the forged checks, typically they would transfer out to other accounts. Alex Murdaugh had a few different Bank of America accounts in addition to the Palmetto State bank accounts. They would go over there as well.
So he had a bank account at Bank of America that was labeled Richard Alexander Murdaugh Forge, is that correct?
That is correct.
And did he also have another bank account at Bank of America that didn't have any mention of Forge, is that correct?
That's correct. The second bank account you're talking about appeared to be a personal checking account just in his name.
And so would money go into one account and then into that checking account, or would money go into directly that checking account, or both?
It depends on the instrument. For example, these 3 checks went into his personal checking account because they were named to Richard Alexander Murdaugh.
And so here, coming out of that Bank of America account ending 6779, that is the checking account, ultimately $747,000 out of the $792,000 was dispersed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then, and how much was dispersed after being transferred into Palmetto State Bank account 6092?
$42,000.
6092, is that a particularly active account for Mr. Murdaugh?
It is. It's one of his most active accounts at Palmetto State Bank.
And then a little bit further down here, we have something that's labeled PSB 1646 Alec Murdaugh Farm. What was that account?
That was, it's just labeled a farm account, and it, from just looking at account records, seems to primarily deal with the farm being Moselle property.
And how much money of these Ferris fees was dispersed out of that farm account?
$3,000.
And then flipping behind that facial summary page, we're not going to go through line by line here, but we have every single individual transaction that is summarized in that covers pivot table. Is that correct?
That is correct. Some of the details I would include on those pivot tables, if there's a date on the check, the date it was negotiated, the amount, and the account number.
And then what we're looking at here, the $192,000, is that one of the instruments that you were tracing?
Yes, sir.
And then this next page, $375,000, is that one of the instruments?
Yes.
And then the next page, the $225,000, is that one of the instruments?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bernie, I am showing you a document labeled at this time as States Exhibit 374. Do you recognize this document?
I do.
What is it?
This is a tracing summary for a check in the amount of $403,500 from the Moss, Kuhn, and Fleming client trust account.
Is this identified in common parlance as Satterfield money?
Yes.
And it's a little bit tiny. I'm going to see if I can zoom in just a bit. Never mind, we'll just stick with this. All right, so on what date was that $403,000 deposited?
January 9th, 2019.
And I said the number, but how much money are we talking here?
$403,500.
All right, and then how much was ultimately, into what account was it deposited?
It was deposited into the Forge account ending in 7625.
And in descriptive terms, which account is that?
The Forge account.
The fake Forge account?
That was DB, yes, sir.
All right, and from that account, were any funds ultimately dispersed?
Yes.
How much?
7625, you can see a cash withdrawal in the amount of $12,500
All right. But
over 2 different transactions.
But otherwise, was that money moved into other accounts?
Yes, primarily yes.
And from the Bank of America checking account, how much money was ultimately dispersed?
$3,970.07.
And then was that money further transferred into other accounts?
It was.
Which account was it primarily transferred into?
Into the account ending in 6092 at Palmetto State Bank.
And out of that Palmetto State Bank account, how much money was ultimately dispersed?
If you could move it down a little bit. There we go. looks like $387,029.93.
I'm not going to go through all of these payments that were made, but there's a cluster of payments here at the top: payment to loan, payment to loan, payment to loan. What are those, generally speaking?
Those are loans that were held at Palmetto State Bank that were under Alex's name, at least some of them in part, some of them in solely him.
And these items in parentheses, are those just sort of descriptors of those particular loans?
Yes, they're for my notes, so I could identify which loan number went to which loan.
And you specifically reviewed the loan documents in relation to each of these loans, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you're familiar with the supporting documentation for what they were collateralized by?
Yes,
So here at the top, we have a loan for Redbeard, correct?
that is correct.
And a payment on that in the amount of $47,000 some odd dollars.
Yes, sir.
And then for Zero United in the amount of $55,684 and some change. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then a payment on a Moselle loan. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And how much was that one?
$65,238.92.
And then a payment on a GMC Yukon. How much was that payment?
$75,099.35.
And how much was paid on this Moselle note?
$104,056.51.
And then once again, as with before, in these yellow tables, you have the specific transactions that you traced using that first in, first out method, correct?
Yes, sir.
And is this the instrument that you traced?
Yes, sir.
I'm showing you a document labeled as States Exhibit 375. Do you recognize this document?
I do.
And what is it?
This is a tracing summary of a check from the Moss, Kuhn, and Fleming client trust account, roughly in the amount of $2.9 million.
And when was this instrument deposited?
That was May 15th, 2019.
And you indicated it was roughly $2.9 million?
Yes, sir.
And into what account was it deposited?
Into a Forge account ending in 7625.
And here we have a summary table of all the various expenses that $2.9 million funded. And the sum total, this first account appears to be the farm account. How much money was ultimately dispersed from the farm account?
$147,247.
And this next one would be for the checking account, is that correct?
That is correct, ending in 6092.
And how much money, this one's a long one, so we have to flip over. How much money was ultimately dispersed from that checking account?
$1,429,753.
And this next one says 6649. Is that an additional account at Palmetto State Bank?
That is another checking account under the name of Alex Murdaugh.
And how much was ultimately dispersed from that account?
$13,000.
And then here we have 6779 BOFA. Is that the checking account at Bank of America?
That is a personal checking account at Bank of America.
And how much was ultimately dispersed from that account?
If you scoot it up just a hair,
I keep looking down and you're looking up. My bad.
$1,208,449.89.
All right, and to identify just a handful of specific transactions or specific individuals who received some of this money, here we have a C.E. Smith. We actually have a variety of names here. In reviewing the instruments,
Hi,
did
Perry.
you see any sort of pattern of differentiation of checks all going to the same person?
I did. I saw it in different names. Just off the top of my head, it was over 10 different variations of that name.
Okay, but all of those different variations, to your understanding and working with law enforcement, who is it your understanding all those checks refer to?
Curtis Edward Smith.
And so here we have a line that says C.E. Smith, and how much went out of this money to him?
So under the name C.E. Smith, $132,687.03.
And over how many instruments was that money effectuated?
24 different instruments.
And then a little bit further down, we have a Curtis E. Smith. And if I can read lines correctly, how much money was dispersed under that name?
$56,765.48.
And over how many instruments?
Your highlighter's covering it by 12.
And the next name down, Curtis Eddie Smith.
$6,404.
And that was a single instrument?
Yes, sir.
Curtis Edward Smith.
$4,725 over one instrument.
And Curtis Smith.
Curtis Smith, $23,823.03 over 4 different instruments.
We additionally had a payment to a credit card here in the amount of how much?
Hi, Daisy.
$7,570.50.
And did you ultimately get the records of that credit card?
I did.
Did you attempt to trace any further what specific purchases that money went to?
I did not. I just ended out the payment to the credit card for my own sanity primarily.
And here we have Randolph Murdaugh III. How much money went to Mr. Murdaugh?
It was $385,000 in one instrument.
And then additionally, right below that, we have the name Scott Harriet. How much money went to Mr. Harriet?
$84 over one instrument.
Thank you, DJO. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I don't get very many super chats, so I appreciate it. Perry, UK True Crime. Yankee is not really a word that refers to Americans in general. It was, well, two different derivations. So the one is that related back to the Revolutionary War, and the Indian word Anki, which means coward. And so basically it's believed that the Indians were calling the invading people from England Yankees, which got turned into Yankee. And then during the American Civil War, the people in the South referred to the people on the East Coast as Yankees. So, yeah, no, actually, Perry, the idea of, I don't know, the idea of being a Yankee doesn't ever enter my head. Yeah, he was throwing money everywhere. Everywhere. What did they disagree about? I'm not getting any sound. Are y'all? Okay. So it's the court reporter turned off the...
We actually have a variety of names here. In reviewing the instruments,
$1,765 over one instrument. Over one instrument.
Okay, so they had a problem. The judge turned off the sound. Okay. I was going to see if there was an objection or what was happening. The judge is probably just guessing, and I'm not an attorney. You should go to either Emily D. Baker or the lawyer you know to find out. But my guess would be the judge is saying, hold on a second, why are we naming all these people? Do we really want to drag all these people into this court case by naming them publicly with the cameras on? Would be my guess. What is y'all's guess?
Compilation blocks things at times. Where I'm from, anywhere north of Texas is a Yankee. Yeah, Jetta, do you remember the pecani sauce commercial?
I do.
Where it was.
And are all of these exhibits from 376 to 397 documents that you prepared tracing the flow of funds from instruments involving money going through the Forge account, through checks negotiated in the name of Palmetto State Bank, and from
Get a
the
row.
Ferris
That's
fees
it,
from the Mack
Jetta.
truck
Yes,
case?
I love that
Yes, sir.
pecani sauce
And I think we actually already got through the Ferris fees from that truck case, so these would be
New
what went
York.
through the Forge account, correct?
Through the Forge account, there's some Palmetto State Bank checks in there as well. In addition to, I believe there might be a check or two in the name of Alex Murdaugh in there.
And throughout all of these tracings,
Oh, look at his
And all
look
of
at his
these
courtroom
summaries.
manner. Very dramatic.
do they reflect that the money that Mr. Murdaugh took went to his personal use and benefit?
They do.
He looks at Alec Murdaugh like, yes, he's such a
And
disappointment.
these are ordered in, roughly speaking, reverse chronological order, correct?
Correct.
Going from 2021 all the way back to a date of deposit on December 20th, 2011. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Wow.
Your Honor,
Alec,
if
you're
I
a
understood
loser.
correctly after briefly conferring with counsel for the defendant,
Loser. Yeah,
that they
hang
would
your
be
head in
willing,
shame there,
for the
buddy.
purposes of this hearing, to
You're not a
stipulate to
good
the
old boy.
admissibility of these documents for the court's in-camera review.
You're a bonehead.
Have I stated that correctly?
You have.
Okay, let's take a look. If my eye, no, there he is. Buster's all the way over here on the end. See him? I thought maybe Buster didn't come to court today, but he's there.
All right, so stipulated.
Your Honor, in the interest of time, I would present these documents to the court as admitted.
I want you to look at,
That correctly. To the admissibility of these documents for the court's in-camera review. Have I stated that correctly?
You have.
now everybody's laughing, but oh, Alex, look how
So
white
stipulated.
Alec is.
Your Honor, in the interest of time, I would
Okay, so you can see Alec, he's sick. Okay, what that tells me, he didn't look that bad when we were talking about Maggie and Paul, right? He didn't get all white and blanched when they were talking about Stephen Smith or Miss Satterfield. But now they're talking about money. Look at how bad he looks. Okay? Now, what I want you to draw attention to is his lead attorney over here. Watch this guy as this is kind of winding down because he's yucking it up. He's being a good old boy. He's making jokes and doing big ha-has and funnies. That tells me that he has a great deal of stress and he's trying to like release it, right? Making jokes. But keep watching him. He's going to reveal in just a second. He's going to show us. We get a picture into the level of stress that he's under. And you can almost see him go, my client is the biggest dumbass on the planet. Okay, just watch this. Just keep your eye on him.
would present these documents to the court as admitted.
See that big sigh?
Provide the original to the court reporters and provide the court a copy of them.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, very good.
And that would be,
You almost feel sorry
further
for
questions?
him. I mean, I shouldn't because he's,
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
this is a disaster. Harpootlian says, you think I got time to go back and get a shot of vodka? Oh, come on, Alec. What are you laughing about?
State ready for
Really?
the jury, state and defense. Okay, if you bring the jury.
You bonehead. Gee, just look at me. I'm a little boy. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. Don't be mad at me. Don't judge me. I'm a good boy. I made some mistakes. That's all.
They,
Tom Darnell? Tom Darnell.
Shall be the truth, so help you
Are you going to tell the truth, Tom Darnell? Yes, ma'am, I am.
Darnell.
Let me take notes. I'm going to quit talking now.
Thank you. Good morning, Agent Darnell.
Good morning.
Could
Another
you tell the
agent.
jurors where you work?
I am a fingerprint examiner at the State Law Enforcement Division Forensic Crime Lab.
And how long have you been a fingerprint examiner for SLED?
Approximately 30 years.
Can you tell us some of your training, education that you've had?
Like it's time.
Yes, ma'am. To begin with, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Criminal Justice from University of South Carolina. County Sheriff's
Lots
Office.
of University of South Carolina.
With all, I've attended.
I'm trying to get us caught up.
Fingerprints, Virginia, and
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to qualify Agent Tom Darnell as an expert in
witness.
fingerprint analysis.
defense.
Is he going to fight that?
He's so qualified.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, Agent Darnell, could you just kind of tell us in general about fingerprint evidence?
well, basically, fingerprint evidence can be most anything. It can be items that are porous, items that are non-porous, items that come to SLED and where we get requested to process them to see if we can identify any fingerprints that might be on the surface. Fingerprints are primarily moisture. About 98% of the fingerprint that may be left on the surface is nothing more than moisture, perspiration, or sweat, if you want to call it sweat. And then once we determine the type of evidence that we have, then we try to develop it, and we try to enhance any impressions that might be there.
I'm the same,
One
DJO.
thing to keep in mind is that in most cases, the fingerprints that we're trying to develop are invisible, basically latent. A latent print means just that, hidden or invisible. So it would require some enhancement.
And how, or what is the process of finding these hidden fingerprints?
Well, we have several different techniques that we can use, everything from super glue fuming to alternate light sources to fluorescent dye stains to different chemicals that we can use. There's also the black fingerprint powder, which is still being used. We don't use a whole lot of that in our laboratory today, but we tend to go with the fluorescent dye stains and the different light sources. It just depends on the type of evidence that we're trying to process.
And now you mentioned, was it, you say super glue fuming?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you describe how that works?
Super glue, what we do is we take the evidence, first of all, it has to be a non-porous surface. That
And can you
evidence,
give us an example of a non-porous surface
Glass.
versus a porous surface?
non-porous would be like a can, a gun, a cartridge case. Porous would be like paper, a paper
Fabric.
cup, paper plate, a piece of, like a handwritten note or a check or something like along that line. But the super glue is a commonly used process across the country, in fact, across the world. And the super glue is simply heated and it creates a vapor or a fume, and that vapor will affix itself to any impressions that might be present on the surface. It enables us to see it better, and it also enables us to use a different technique or a different step of the process when it comes to trying to enhance the impression.
Okay, and when that print, I guess, is revealed in the fuming process, what do you do to analyze the print?
Well, once we get the print developed, we have it photographed. We have the the luxury of having a photo studio within our laboratory, and we have a photographer that will document that for us photographically, so that we can then compare it to any known standards that we may be asked to compare it to.
So you would use the photograph for comparison purposes?
Yes, ma'am.
You don't do any kind of lifts of the print or anything like that?
I've done lots of lifts over my career with the black powder and the clear tape, which is what most of you are probably familiar with. But in this case, black powder was not used. I was working strictly off of a photograph.
So you did receive some items to test in this case for fingerprints?
I did.
I'm going to have you take a look at State's Exhibit 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, and 68. Are those 300 blackout shell cases that you received to process for fingerprint evidence?
It is.
And did you find any evidence on those cases?
Actually, I did not. There was what we call, the result that I used with these items was that there was no fingerprint evidence was observed.
Would you expect to find fingerprint evidence on fired cases?
We don't find a lot of developed prints on cartridge cases. It does happen. We do find fingerprints on cartridge cases, but just not a great deal. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the cartridge cases they're exposed to heat, they're exposed to friction, and since fingerprints are so fragile, a lot of times that is probably a couple of reasons why we don't find a lot of prints on cartridge cases.
All right, did you also receive State's Exhibit 33 and 34 to test for or examine for fingerprint evidence?
I did.
Did you find any fingerprint evidence on those shot shells?
I did not.
And again, would you expect to find fingerprint evidence on items of that nature?
You know, we always make the attempt. Sometimes we're surprised when we process evidence that something will develop. I personally I've not had a lot of success with getting prints on shot shells. It's not to say that it hasn't happened.
And you said you've been doing this for about 30 years?
Yes, ma'am.
And in that time, have you ever found yourself a fingerprint on a fired case or shot shell?
I can't recall that I have developed anything that I can identify. I have developed ridge detail, or I have developed fingerprints on cartridge cases, but I can't recall honestly having a case where I was able to actually identify it.
Did you also receive a shotgun to check for fingerprint evidence?
I did.
That being State's Exhibit 4, a Benelli Super Black Eagle 3. Did you find any fingerprint evidence on that weapon?
I did not.
What else did you do with that weapon while you had it?
There was an additional request to have it swabbed for touch DNA, which I did. I swabbed various areas of the shotgun for DNA purposes.
And I will hand you State's Exhibit 307. Are those the swabs that you collected from that shotgun?
Yes, ma'am. It has the date that I collected it. It has my name and my initials and on the envelopes as well as on the seal.
Your Honor, at this time we move State's 307 into evidence. The swabs from the shotgun.
I'm not sure which shotgun.
From the Benelli that was recovered at the scene.
Murdaugh had.
Yes.
No objection.
It's admitted.
And do you recall where on that gun you collected those swabs?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you tell the jury?
If I could look at my notes real quick. I swabbed the trigger. I swabbed the rear stock front stock and the ejection lever on the shotgun. Yes, and that's the two areas that I swabbed.
And why would you have swabbed those particular areas?
Well, typically, in a case involving guns, shotguns, pistols, we typically swab the trigger separately to possibly get a print on the trigger as who might have last had their finger on the trigger. And then we swab other areas of the gun that might be more conducive for touch DNA versus latent prints. Anytime we get something that we have a latent print request and a DNA request, we have to try to determine which area to swab, which area is typically handled by someone that might give us the best chance for any type of forensic evidence, whether it be DNA or latent prints.
And did you also swab the head stamps of those two shot shells?
Yes, I did.
And those swabs are in states 307 up there with the other swabs, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you have an occasion to also examine Paul's cell phone?
I did.
I'm going to hand you states exhibit 309. Are those the swabs that you collected from Paul Murdaugh's cell phone?
These are swabs that I took from a cell phone. I don't know for sure whose phone it was, but these are swabs that I took from the phone, which was my item 25.
And could you refer to your report to tell us what item 25 is listed as?
Item 25 is listed as a one iPhone cell phone, black in color with a clear case.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to admit states exhibit 309.
No objection.
Did you also examine that cell phone for fingerprints?
I did.
Did you find any fingerprints on the phone?
I did not find anything that I could identify. I found a very small amount of fingerprint evidence on the phone. The result that I had to render was what we refer to as no value for comparison, which what that simply means is that there was the evidence of someone's fingers having come in contact with the phone. There just was not enough detail, not enough clarity for me to be able to compare it to anyone.
Do you recall examining some other shotguns or rifles in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
That would be a 300 blackout rifle, a Mossberg shotgun, a Browning shotgun, and another Benelli shotgun.
That's correct.
Did you find any fingerprints on any of those guns?
Nothing that I could identify. Again, the result of no value for comparison was the result that I reported.
And if a gun has a camouflage print, for example, would that make it harder to find fingerprints on that weapon?
Well, not necessarily. We have some very bright lights that we would use to help us pick up anything that might be on a camouflage type surface. Keep in mind, we're spraying a fluorescent dye stain prior to using the light source, so that does help us see the prints much better. There are some areas on these shotguns that were like textured, which would not be very conducive to prints. But as far as the camouflage area, you know, it makes it a little harder to see, but we do have the means to be able to analyze it thoroughly.
And these items that we've been talking about, when you process them for fingerprint evidence, you use the super glue fuming method?
Yes, ma'am.
While you were processing those guns, did you collect swabs from each gun?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to hand you State's Exhibit 308, if you take a look at that.
Yes, ma'am. These are the envelopes that I placed the swabs from the shotguns It's got my date, initials, and where it came from on the shotgun.
Your Honor, at this time, Ms. Tate removes Tate's Exhibit 308 into evidence.
Okay.
Now, did you receive a 30-round magazine that was full of 300 blackout cartridges?
I did.
Did you test that item for fingerprint evidence?
I did.
Did you find any fingerprints on that magazine?
It was, again, as the shotguns, it was all no value for comparison.
What about each of the bullets that was in that magazine? Did you examine them in any way?
Yes, ma'am. I took each one of them out of the magazine and processed all of them individually.
Did you find any fingerprint evidence on those bullets?
No, ma'am, I did not.
And what did you do with these swabs that you collected?
Once I collect the swabs, I allow them to air dry, and then once I secure them into envelopes, I seal them, put my date, initials, and then I package them up accordingly, and they ultimately wind up with the DNA department. I believe in this case, I took them down to our evidence control department, and then DNA will pick them up from there.
All right. One moment, Darla. No further questions from Ms. Tate at this time. You'll answer any questions from the judge.
Seat court, Your Honor. All these items were processed in the lab, is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
And help me to understand this. You processed 3 shotguns?
I believe that was right, yes, sir.
You processed, were any of them loaded with shotgun shells?
I don't recall them being loaded.
So you did not process any of the, if they were loaded, you didn't process any of the shells in them?
Normally, when a weapon comes into the laboratory, it's cleared and unloaded prior to it getting to our laboratory. So, had they been unloaded, I would have or had they been loaded, they would have been unloaded prior to me receiving them, and I would have processed what had been inside the weapon at that time.
So the weapon we identified earlier as, let me put the glasses on here, as, I may have left it on the table, I apologize. It's right here. Number 22, item number 22, the camo Benelli Super, I'm sorry, yeah, Benelli Super Black Eagle, the 2 unfired shotgun shells. You processed that at the lab?
Yes, sir.
Was the gun loaded when it came to you?
My notes do not indicate that it was loaded, and as I said, normally when a weapon, a shotgun, comes into the laboratory, it's unloaded prior to it coming to me. My notes indicate that it was not loaded.
And the other shotguns, I've looked at your analysis on them, that there were no fingerprints of evidentiary value on the 3 other shotguns, right?
That's correct.
But there's no indication that you processed, if they had been loaded and unloaded, any of those shotgun shells, correct?
That's correct. I only processed what was given, what was brought into the laboratory.
And you processed those on June 9th, is that correct?
That sounds right, yes, sir, June 9th.
Now, the cartridges, there's a bullet, and then there's a casing on a typical semi-automatic weapon. Were you ever asked to, you were asked to process the ejected cartridges that were involved in the murder, correct? The 308s? I mean, the
Yeah.
300 blackouts?
Yes, sir.
And those had been fired, and what you indicated that once a bullet or a shotgun shell had been fired, it heats up? Is that why you can't get a fingerprint off of it?
Well, that would be one possible explanation. Heat, friction, they're on the ground. You know, weather can have an effect sometimes if it's raining or if it's hot or cold. There are lots of things that could have an effect on whether or not a print would be left.
And I think your testimony is that if not rarely, never found fingerprints on an expended casing. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't say rarely, never. I know of cases in our laboratory that have been, where they have been able to identify prints on cartridge cases. It just doesn't happen very often, but it does happen.
Okay, but then you processed a number of, there was a magazine with a number of 300 blackout shells that had never been fired, correct?
Yes, sir.
Bullets, I'm sorry.
That's correct.
And that's a piece of brass, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, is a piece of brass conducive to fingerprints?
Yes, sir. It can be, yes, sir.
Any evidence these bullets have been wiped or something, or just, I mean, please explain to the jury why you would normally get fingerprints off of a piece of brass, a unspent bullet. Why is that?
Well, you got to keep in mind that a latent print is nothing more than, or mostly moisture. They're very fragile. It doesn't take much to wipe a print off of the surface. The cartridges I think that you're speaking of were in a magazine, so they've been shoved into a magazine, and then you got to get them out. So you got friction there going on, but any surface that's smooth and fairly clean and not corrugated or textured can be conducive to prints. I have developed prints on cartridges before. It just doesn't happen very often.
Again, it's a brass surface, almost a polished brass surface. Did you say because it's mostly moisture, isn't there some oil involved in that from the fingers? Or am I wrong about that?
Well, you would have, as far as coming from your fingerprints, from the fingers, or
well,
from?
I mean, the finger, it's always just moisture?
It's mostly 98 to 99% moisture. And then you might have some other substances mixed in there. But it's mostly just sweat is what's left behind.
You do retrieve fingerprints occasionally, do you not? You find fingerprints on things?
Oh, yes, sir. I've developed quite a few prints in my 30 years of doing this.
And once you develop a print, you can compare it based on how many points you have to do a comparison to make a match?
Well, there's no set number in this country where you have to have a certain minimum number of points. You just have to have a sufficient amount of clarity and to be able to determine that an impression was made by a certain individual.
Okay. Did you ever go to the scene of these murders?
No, sir, I did not.
You were not called out that night?
No, sir.
So the forensic folks that went out there, to your knowledge, did they throw any powder down? Did they do anything to find any fingerprints that night?
I honestly don't know. I did not look at their notes from their crime scene or what have you. I really had no real reason to. I was just asked to process the things that they brought me.
So let me ask you this. You got a doorknob right here. Doorknob. I just grabbed it to open it. It's brass. Would that leave a fingerprint?
It's possible. You have to consider how much someone perspires when they touch something. You have to consider how soon after the doorknob was touched did someone else grab the doorknob, because a latent print is extremely fragile. It doesn't take much to obliterate a print.
But you would check. If you were on the scene, you'd look.
If I was on the scene and I felt like that area was accessed by someone, I probably would have checked, yes, sir.
I mean, it appeared that there had been a shotgun blast to the victim inside a room behind that door, and you didn't know whether the door was open or closed before that person was shepherded in there or walked in there. you would want to at least look at the knob, right?
Yes, sir. I
But why?
probably would, but, you know, I
It
was
was
not
the
on the
Murdaugh
scene, so I
family.
don't really know
You would have only expected to see Murdaugh
exactly
handprints,
what all they had
correct?
going on. So, but if, with your scenario that you're speaking of, yes, sir, I probably would have checked.
And you would expect to see notes somewhere from the crime scene folks that they looked at the doorknob. But you can't just eyeball it. Don't you have to put some powder on it, or don't you have to put something on it to raise the visibility of the fingerprint?
Well, yes, sir. In some cases, you can actually see a print if it's more of a, what we call a patent print. A patent print is a print that might be left behind with a, you know, in a residue. Could be in grease, could be in blood, it could be in dirt, anything such as that. So, but ordinarily, when you go to look for prints, you've got to do some sort of processing to a surface, depending on the surface and depending on just what you're trying to do.
So if you had a relatively small room where somebody's head had exploded and blood and all kinds of bodily fluids were sprayed over the inside of that room, you would want to take a meticulous examination of that room to see if there are any fingerprints in blood or other bodily fluids, would you not? Would you?
I would, yes, sir.
And you would expect to see something in some report by the crime scene folks where they actually did such an examination, would you not? Would you expect to see notes detailing that they at least looked at it?
Yes, sir. I mean, you know, again, this is, you know, I wasn't at the scene. I can, but if you're describing this type of a scene, if it was me, I would take notes, you know, detailed notes, you know, because, you know, photographs, notes, sketches, all that kind of goes hand in hand.
But there should have been, well, strike that. You would also expect to see any surface that could have come into contact with perpetrator to have been processed, either photographed or processed in some way. You would expect to see that in the notes of the crime scene investigators, correct?
I would think in the notes or in their, you know, testimony or anything such as that, you know, there should be something to explain what was done, yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know if there was a fingerprint person or somebody that had those skills in the crime scene team that came out that night?
I don't know. I know that there was no one from the latent printing department where I worked at the scene that day.
Do you go out to crime scenes? Do you go to crime scenes?
I've done plenty in my earlier days, but I have not been on crime scenes for quite some time.
Do you have people in your latent print unit that do go to crime scenes?
Not really. The latent print department, the way it was set up, we pretty much are in the laboratory setting, and we process evidence that comes in from crime scenes. We don't typically go to the crime scene.
And so I guess if I'm summarizing this, everything they had you look at, you looked at in the lab.
Yes, sir.
And you found no, when I say identifiable prints, it sounds to me like you found no evidence of any prints.
Well, I found, anytime I report something as no value for comparison, that means that I did find evidence of fingerprints. It just wasn't enough to compare it to anyone. Anytime I say nothing was observed, that means there was nothing observed.
So, I mean, I looked at all these, other than the, no value for comparison on the cell phone, that would mean you saw something, but you didn't have enough to compare.
Yes, sir, and, you know, it was no value. You know, keep in mind, again, their latents are fragile. You've got weather involved, you know, water, rain, that sort of thing certainly is detrimental to fingerprint evidence being left behind.
So other than the cell phone, everyone else says no fingerprint evidence was observed. That would mean there was nothing, not even a partial, right?
Yes, sir. Anytime that result is in the report, that's what that means, yes, sir.
Other than the cell phone, you didn't even find any evidence of fingerprints, not a partial, not a smudge, not anything.
Well, I believe there were some additional long guns that came into me where I did get no value for comparison, but the initial shotgun that came into me was, nothing was observed, yes, sir.
And the initial shotgun would have been number 22.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. And would it surprise you to know that Mr. Murdaugh was seen holding that shotgun, had actually retrieved it from his house, brought it down to the murder scene?
Counsel's testifying.
Response?
I'm just citing evidence that the state's already put into evidence. I'm not testifying to it if these are facts that have been already established by the state. He's an expert. He can opine.
Pardon?
He's an expert, therefore he can give an opinion.
The objection's overruled.
Would it surprise you to know that Mr. Murdaugh was seen that evening when first responders came, holding that shotgun, and the state has indicated, I mean, that's not in conflict, no one's challenging that, and yet there were no, I mean, you found no evidence of fingerprints, is that correct?
Right, yes, sir, and, you know, that's, you know, prints aren't always left on surfaces when you touch them. You know, just because you touch something does not mean you're gonna leave a print, and there are all kind of variables as to why.
Would you agree with me you found no prints on any of the items you were asked to examine? Cartridge cases, fired, unfired, shotguns, the shells in the shotguns, you just found no prints whatsoever?
I found none of value for comparison, which tells me that there was something there, but it just wasn't of value to compare.
And it's only
yes.
on the cell phone?
The cell phone and then the additional long guns that came into me later.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Beg the court's indulgence. Thanks, sir. No more questions.
Redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Agent Darnell, you were previously lieutenant of crime scene.
Yes, ma'am. I was actually promoted to lieutenant over the Lake Print Crime Scene Department in 1998, where I was in that role for about 6 years.
And in your experience in that position, are crime scene personnel trained to look for fingerprints at a crime scene?
Yes, ma'am. Back when I was a lieutenant over the crime scene department, we used to do the crime scene, we did the printing, we did everything. Now it's two separate departments. We have a lake print department and we have a crime scene department. The crime scene department, as I understand it, they are trained in how to process crime scenes, which would include how to process certain things on its own scene for fingerprints. In other words, if it was something that was large and not able to transport back to the laboratory, they do get some training in how to process for prints.
And with such a bloody scene, did you get any bloody prints in this case?
I was not submitted any bloody prints in this case.
Thank you. Nothing further from the staff.
Stand further.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down.
Thanks, sir.
Call your next witness.
Put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give to this court to be the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Have a seat on the witness stand. Repeat your name and spell your last name for the record.
Blake Johnson, last name Johnsson.
Hi, Agent Johnson.
Hello.
Could you tell the jury where you work?
I work for the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division.
And how long have you been with SLED?
Been with SLED a little over 5 years.
And what are some of the duties of your position?
At SLED, I work for the investigative services in the Low Country region, and as part of that, I investigate crimes within the lower 12 counties, to include homicides, officer-involved shootings, cases such as that.
And with your involvement in the investigation of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh's murders, did you have a chance to collect some vocal swabs in that case?
I did.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 338 and State's Exhibit 339.
This one is a buccal swab that I took from Claude Rowe, CB Rowe. And
That's State's Exhibit 338.
and this is a buccal swab that I took from Connor Cook.
Okay. And how do you know you took these two buccal swabs?
Because of the writing on the outside. This is the exterior envelope. If I open them, the one that I have side would be inside.
All right. And how did you collect these buccal swabs?
I was provided buccal swabs. They come two to a pack in a sterile pack. They're opened, and the inside between the cheek and gum of both subjects are swabbed, and they're put back in an envelope and sealed.
And sealed?
Yep.
Okay. They're sealed so nobody can tamper or alter those buccal swabs?
Yep. Evidence tape is placed on the seal, and it's signed and initialed and dated.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state removes State's Exhibit 338 and 339 into evidence.
No objection, Your
They're admitted.
And Your Honor, we have no further questions for this witness.
No questions.
Thank you. Now
Thank you,
step
Judge.
down. Your next witness.
Lawrence Wiggins.
Put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this court to be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You have a seat on the witness stand. Repeat your name and spell your last name for the record.
Lawrence Wiggins, Wiggins.
I believe it's Chief Wiggins now, is that correct?
That is correct.
Are you the chief of Allendale? Is it Sheriff's Office, Police Department?
Yes, so I'm currently employed as the chief of police for the town of Allendale.
But back in 2021, where were you employed?
I was employed with the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. I was assigned to the investigative services, and I worked out of the regional office in Walterboro.
And at that time, were you involved in the investigation of the deaths of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh?
I was preliminarily.
And did you have an occasion to collect some buccal swabs?
I did.
I'm going to hand you State's Exhibit 336 and 337. You could take a look at those and tell us what we have there.
We have buccal swabs taken from Mr. Roger Davis and Anthony Cook.
And you collected those swabs?
I did.
And how do you know you collected them?
My initials and
I'll consent to the admission of these, rather than going through the process of how he identified them and collected them. Now, she's welcome to do that, but I'm just trying to save a little time here.
All right.
So, there's State's Exhibit 336 and 337. Into evidence. Well, Your Honor, we would have no further questions for this witness then.
No questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
That was short and sweet, wasn't it?
Chandler Horny.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this court to be the truth, so help you God? Okay, have a seat on the witness stand. Please repeat your name and spell your last name for the record.
Hi, my name is Chandler Horny, Horney.
And Agent Horny, can you tell the jury who you work for?
I work for the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division.
Okay, and what is your position there?
I'm a special agent with the Vice Services Unit.
And were you involved in the murder investigation of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh?
I was.
And did you collect some books?
There's way too many snickers and people laughing in the gallery. Those young attorneys better get it under control.
340. You will tell us what those are.
These are the collected buccal
Hey,
swabs
Teresa
from
Felton.
Morgan Dowdy and Miley Altman.
And how were those collected?
They were actually collected by a coworker, Special Agent Anthony Sampson. In my presence, he took the swabs of the inside of both of these individuals' cheeks.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry,
then,
Nancy
when he
Drew.
took the swabs, he placed them in,
This envelope.
and they were placed in bags that were sealed, not to be tampered with.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, the state removes takes Exhibit 340 into evidence.
No objection.
Submitted.
We have no further questions for this agent.
Sorry, Your Honor.
Any questions?
No, sir. Thank you.
Step down.
Short and sweet. They're moving through them now, aren't they? Probably gonna break for lunch?
The state next calls Joe Moore, I'll be all day.
No, not yet. Yeah, you too, Teresa. Glad you're here. If you look down the number of channels that are live right now that are streaming this trial,
Swear from the testimony you're about to give
everyone,
this court to be
even the
the truth, so help you God?
non-true crime
Have a seat on the
channels
witness
are
stand.
streaming
Please
it.
repeat your name and spell your last name for the record.
Joe Marr, I'll be all day. Spelling my last name is A-L-B as in Bravo, A-Y-A-L-D-E. I'll be all day. If it makes it any easier, my peers call me Joe.
Joe.
Hey, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. And you did tell me a little trick to pronouncing that last name there.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what was that?
If you remember the phrase, I'll be here all day, and drop the here, I'll be all day, you got it.
And thank you so much for sharing that with me.
Yes, ma'am.
And you work for SLED, is that right?
I do.
Okay, and did you have the chance to collect some buccal swabs in the investigation of the murders of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh?
I did.
I'm going to hand you State's Exhibit 342, 343, and 344. We'll take a look, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and State's Exhibit 342 is a buccal swab you collected from who?
All right, this Exhibit 342 is from Mr. Randy Murdaugh.
Okay, and then 343?
343 is a DNA sample collected from a Hippolito Torres.
And 344?
This final buccal sample was collected from his son, Alan Gonzalez.
And how did you collect these buccal swabs?
Yes, ma'am. These were collected via a DNA or buccal swab kit, which essentially is a swab is a special agent Johnson explained to you earlier. So it's simply a swab from each side of the inner cheek, placed into a secured envelope, and then sealed in a evidence envelope, such as this one.
It'll be sealed so it was not tampered with, is that right?
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay. At this time, the state removes tapes 342, 343, and 344 into evidence.
It says it fits. Any objection?
No, sir.
Admitted without objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. State has no further questions for Joe. Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Thank you for your indulgence, one moment. No questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, next.
Next witness is going to be fairly lengthy, and Mr. Fernandez is going to call him, and we'd ask for just a moment to get the exhibits out that he needs and get them in order so it moves orderly before the jury, if we could.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a brief break.
I love this judge because he is just no nonsense, right? We don't have all this wasted time and long lunches and long breaks, and it's really good. All right, I was kind of working while we were listening, so sorry about that. So what do you guys think so far? Any surprises with any of those witnesses? I didn't think so. I'm gonna tell you, to me, it seems like the defense is just weak. They just don't. There's nothing to do. You know, they don't know what to do with the whole problem after the evidence came out. You know, showing that Alec Murdaugh was at the dog pen that day. I know that there's some of the YouTube lawyers that are different. They have a different, I guess, opinion about how this thing is going. But I still feel like I think that was a game changer. The dog kennel video was a real game changer, and I don't know how they're going to walk it back. Right? I don't know what they think they can do with it to rehabilitate the impact of it. So what do y'all think? Has there been a game changer? Do you still think that the defense is winning? Like, where do you feel on this? He's feeling more uncomfortable today. I think so too, Teresa. I think you're exactly right. It did seem like the dog kennel, the day that they presented the evidence on the dog kennel, he's not ever recovered from that, has he? He looks much different now. Yep, agreed. And the lawyers, I mean the judge is great because he's got full, firm control of what's happening, doesn't he? Hope the fraudulent funds will be shown to jurors. I do think they will. If you go back to when this was first addressed at the beginning of the hearing, the judge was really pushing back on the defense. He never pushed back on the prosecution, but he pushed back on the defense, sort of challenging him, going, "But why shouldn't I? Because you opened the door to this, kid." So it does look like to me that the judge, before they did their arguments, he looked like he was already considering that he was going to let it in. So it'll be interesting to see where we go, but I think it's coming in. What may not come in, I will say this: what might not be allowed is Satterfield's son. That might not, because it sort of leaves you. Now I know that he stole the kid's money. Okay, I know that, but my thing, how would they connect that situation to the murders of Maggie and Paul? I think it's too specific. I think when you just let the financial experts speak and they just talk about the overall state of financial affairs and the unethical and criminal fiduciary behavior, that's enough to establish motive. I'm not sure that Satterfield would be needed unless that's to just, I don't know, maybe I don't know. What do y'all think? The cell phone definitely tell a story that goes against what Murdaugh said, right? And videos are very hard to forget. Like when they were presenting the timeline and they were talking about the minutes and stuff, the jury's not taking notes, and so that can kind of get lost, right? Down to the minute. But when you watch a video and you can hear it and you can see it, you don't forget that. You watch that video of Paul talking about the dog and the chicken, and you can hear Maggie's voice, and then to recognize, oh my God, 6 minutes later, they believe she died. And then after they're dead, her phone is magically walking around 95 steps? Really? So Murdaugh himself admitted that he did touch Paul's phone, and now it looks like he also went through Maggie's phone. So did he believe that he had destroyed the Snapchat video? Maybe. I don't know. Because one thing that I was curious about is, didn't the defense attorneys have that video? Didn't they know that it was out there? So it's very strange. Satterfield is the money fraud case, not the murder. I don't see how it would tie in. Yeah, agree, Diane. And the reason that they have these financial people is to provide for motive. But isn't Satterfield's money tied up in all of the financial stuff? So I don't know why they would let him testify, but I'm not an attorney, so we'll see what ends up happening. Yeah, and to be careful here, they do not have to establish a motive. They do not have to establish a motive. But, you know, if you're going to send somebody to prison for the rest of their life, you probably want to know why they did what they did. And good God, when you look at the dates where the greatest amount of financial fraud occurred, it's perfectly in alignment with him getting overwhelmed emotionally, having a temper tantrum, and killing Paul. I wonder sometimes if he blamed Paul because he's such a little spineless, whiny man. I wonder if, before Paul killed that girl,
Okay, and they call you next witness.
he was able to hide his business dealings, right? But then when Paul killed that girl, it opened everything up to investigation, and that's when they began asking questions. And so I could see where he might break down in stress and say, Paul, it's all your fault. If you hadn't screwed up and been drunk driving and whatnot, then we wouldn't have gotten caught. Everything would be okay.
And spell your last name for the record.
So there's that too to consider. I'm going to be quiet now.
My name is Paul Greer, Greer.
Paul, how are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you.
Take a moment to
How you
unpack
doing?
yourself if you need to.
How you doing? I'm fine. How's the family?
Paul, if you would, please introduce yourself to the jury and tell us a little bit when you graduated high school and where you went for education.
Sure. My name is Paul Greer. I am originally from the upstate of South Carolina, went to school and graduated high school in 2009. Upon graduating high school, I attended the University of South Carolina and received a Bachelor's of Science in Biological Sciences from the University of South Carolina.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to ask you, if you would, to pull that microphone a little closer so we can all hear you.
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. All right, Paul, walk us through a little bit about your career. With whom are you currently employed?
I'm employed at the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, which is commonly known as SLED.
All right, and tell us a little bit about your professional career. How did you get started at SLED, and what is it that you do there?
Yes, sir. After completing my Bachelor of Science at USC, I began an internship at SLED in the Forensic Services Laboratory. I specifically did that internship with our Firearms and Toolmark department. I interned there for several months and ultimately achieved a position there in that unit. I began my employment officially at SLED in March of 2014 in the Firearms Department, where I began training to become a firearms examiner.
All right, and are you currently employed as a firearms examiner with SLED?
Yes, sir.
All right, Paul, Mr. Greer, if you would, walk us through what that required in order to become a firearms examiner.
Sure. In order to become a firearms examiner, there's a lot of extensive training on the job that must be conducted. At SLED, I began an in-house training program that we refer to as the Firearm and Toolmark Course of Instruction. During this time, again, it was extensive, approximately 3 years or so. I assisted other examiners who were qualified on the job, prep their cases. I learned how to work those cases. I looked at thousands of fired ammunition components on the microscope and did many comparisons of those. During that time, I also completed multiple written and practical examinations. At the conclusion of that training program, I was given a comprehensive final exam. That included some mock casework within our
This
laboratory.
guy should have been a
I
hippotherapy.
successfully completed
He
all
has
of
got
the
a very
training
calming
in that mock
voice.
casework and was able to
Are
begin
y'all
working
getting
cases on
sleepy?
my own.
I'm like, this is
In
so
addition to the
nice.
comprehensive qualifications and testing required to become a forensic examiner, are forensic examiners in SLED also subject to yearly testing as well?
Yes, sir. We do the competency at the conclusion of our training program, but we also participate in proficiency testing each year within an area in our discipline. So that is completed. I complete a proficiency test each year, and that just assures that we're maintaining our competency.
Thank you. Paul, are you a member of any
I
professional
want to
organizations?
adopt
Yes,
this
sir.
guy.
And which ones would that,
He
which one
is
would that
so
be?
relaxing.
I'm a member of the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners, which is also known as AFTE.
Have you had any
He's so
opportunity to attend
pleasant,
additional
isn't he?
trainings or conferences under the umbrella of firearms and toolmark examinations?
Yes, sir, I have.
Please explain a couple of those or a few of those, if you would.
Yes, sir. AFTE hosts an annual conference each year, and AFTE, I might add, is an international organization. It's a group of firearms and toolmark examiners around the world, as well as other scientists and members from the academic world. We get together each year, and I attend that when I'm able in order to share information and see what's happening within the field of firearm and toolmark examination. I've attended several of those conferences, and I've also attended some regional conferences that have been hosted by the FBI laboratory in Quantico.
And speaking of laboratory, is your laboratory accredited?
Record
Yes, it
books
is.
for
And
Audible.
what is the accreditation it operates under?
The SLED laboratory is
Listen.
accredited under ANAB. That is a national organization that follows ISO 17025 standards, and those are international standards. So our laboratory is operating within the same set of standards as other labs in the United States that are accredited with ANAB, and also those who follow the ISO 17025.
And in order to maintain accreditation,
Wow,
is there
that
an
is so
inspection
cool. He's
process
got
that
great
ANAB
voice.
requires? Yes, sir.
All right, and explain if you would the
Yes.
kind of a couple of
Marcia,
inspections that
did
that
you
are
see the
typically
thing about the
required.
cats and
In
the
order
purring,
to
how it
maintain our
affects our blood
accreditation,
pressure?
we have a visit approximately every 4 years. Auditors come in to the laboratory to check our casework, review our files.
Oh, that's cool
make sure
too,
that
too.
we're operating within those standards. And they watch us perform casework. That's a huge component. And they do this for all of the disciplines within the laboratory. And that audit every 4 years within that cycle helps to ensure that we're meeting those standards.
Okay, I have a
Internally
question.
at SLED, we also have internal audits each year. So even though the ANAB inspectors that come every 4 years, we may not see them every year, there is some type of audit being performed within our departments and in our casework each year.
Do y'all think
Does
that
the
he
SLED laboratory
practiced
operate
his
under
voice,
a
or do you
policies and
think that's
procedures
natural?
guideline for the overall agency?
Yes, sir, we
Michael
do.
Galen
All right, and
on
explain a little bit about how that involves the lab.
I haven't, Jennifer, but I'll look it
SLED
up.
in general has a large set of policies that we must adhere to. Within the laboratory, each department has a manual that they must
I
follow.
think you practiced
gives
that
them
voice.
information
I don't
on
think
how
that's
to conduct
natural.
their everyday work and how to perform casework. Additionally, and following the A&AB accreditation, we have a SLED quality manual that is specifically for the laboratory. We must follow that as well, and those are all guidelines to help us to conduct casework.
And in addition to the SLED quality
You think
assurance
he's all
manual, would there additionally be a SLED firearms department manual that you have to comply with?
A
Yes,
good
sir, there is a
storyteller,
firearms,
credible witness, expert
excuse me, a
witness.
firearms
There you
manual
go,
that we must
Teresa.
follow.
Yeah.
Okay, just very briefly, please explain what that involves.
Yes, sir. That again is just a document that gives us information on how to conduct our day-to-day casework, what to do with evidence, how we should examine that.
You see how
It also
precisely
gives
he's
us
pronouncing
information
his
into our training
T's and his
program,
P's.
any type of calibration or measurement references that we need to consult for our equipment that we use. All of that information is contained within that manual that we have to follow and can reference.
All right, and if you would, please explain to the jury what firearms identification, generally the subject matter, what that is.
Sure. Firearms identification is a discipline in forensic science where our main objective each day is to examine those fired ammunition components. So imagine a fired cartridge case or a fired bullet, and we're looking at those in order to determine if they were fired by a specific firearm.
Thank you. How long again have you been working in the SLED laboratory?
I've been employed in the firearms department at SLED for almost 9 years.
And have you had an opportunity to testify in courts
God,
such as
Alex
this?
looks
I have.
demonic today.
Would that be both state and federal courts?
I have testified in state and federal courts, yes, sir.
Approximately how many times, or do you know how many times?
Approximately 27 times, yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this point, the state moves
I
to
get it.
admit
I get
Mr.
it,
Greer as a
Shalimar.
firearms and tool mark examination expert.
Your Honor, no objections to his qualifications.
He's so qualified.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, Mr. Greer, I'd like to take the moment to kind of educate the jury a little bit on firearms.
Meanwhile, back
And
at the
if you would,
ranch,
please
he's-
tell us a little bit about the.
he leaves
first
the
of all, are you familiar with the
courthouse
two
and he
kind of
calls and
cartridge
he says,
rounds
"Hey,
we're
y'all,
gonna primarily
yeah,
be
I'm
talking about
done.
today?"
Y'all
Yes,
come
sir.
on out to the
And are you
house.
familiar with
Let's
the two
drink us
kind
some
of,
cold beer
firearms
tonight.
we're
I'll
gonna-
tell
we're
y'all
gonna be
all
talking
about
today?
it."
Yes, sir, I am.
All right. If you would, please give us a
sir.
little, an intro to firearms.
I'm sure I've never
beginning with
treated
perhaps a
Jake
shotgun.
there.
Tell us what makes that a unique
Fred,
type of
welcome.
firearm and how it generally operates.
Yes, sir. In general, a firearm is a mechanism that propels a projectile through the combustion of gunpowder.
Excellent point, Hybrid
he was stating,
Pisces.
there are several different types of firearms, and one of them is a
Chickened
shotgun.
out like the go chicken he
A
is,
shotgun,
right?
if you imagine, is a long gun, typically that is designed to be fired from the shoulder. And that has a smooth bore.
Makes
and
you
what
think
the bore is, it's just the
he's
inside of that
afraid
barrel.
of what
so there's no
the
rifling
ammunition's
inside
gonna
that barrel,
show,
typically.
right, Teresa?
A shotgun is also different than maybe a handgun that you may be familiar with, and it fires shot shells.
than
And a shot
perhaps a
shell
handgun
is
that you'd already be
a cartridge, if you will, that
A
could be plastic or
cartridge, as
metal,
you
that can
will.
contain multiple projectiles or a single projectile.
When you said barrel, smooth bore, and rifling, would rifling mean sort of the interior of the barrel where the bullet exits is spiraled inside?
Correct. That rifling is in barrels in order
Correct.
to give
That
a
rifling
bullet
is
that's
in
traveling down that
barrels
barrel,
in
its
order to
rotary
get out
twist
of the
and
traveling
spin, so
down
that way
that
it can
barrel
travel to
to
a target
travel
or its
to a
destination.
target
And does that
towards its
rifling assist in the bullet
destination.
traveling in a straight line consistently?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the
The
question?
rifling, spinning the bullet, making it go out, does that allow it to travel in a straight line?
Yes, that rifling that's inserted into that barrel.
Yes,
you'll
that
think of it kinda
rifling
like a
inserted
quarterback
into
throwing
the
a football.
barrel is
It
there
helps it give
designed
it
to
that
make
nice
the bullet
spiral so
run.
that
It gives it a
can
nice
travel,
spiral as it
more
travels in a
efficiently.
straight line
And
to its ultimate
kind of the,
destination.
opposite of that would be the smooth bore of a shotgun. How does that affect the pellets or the
Hell, a
BBs inside of the
shotgun, you just gotta point it in the general
So in a
direction and
typical
pull the
shotgun,
trigger.
You don't have that rifling that gives it that spin or twist, but that's not the design of the shotgun. So when those pellets or a slug or whatever is traveling down the bore of that shotgun, it is just traveling out the barrel based on the combustion from it firing.
And if you would please
In
describe
short, a
to us
shotgun is
what
just
type
like
of
a
ammunition
mini
a shotgun will shoot.
cannonball.
Typically, you use a shot shell. That can be made of some type of plastic. Typically, we see that with some type of metal
Yes,
head.
the ammunition will match up to the
Inside
gun
that,
from which it was
shot shell,
fired, Teresa.
there can be multiple projectiles. You hear of pellets. We think of birdshot, buckshot. That's what would be inside of a shot shell. Also in there may be other components. That could be plastic or some type of paper material, and that would be a wad. And those have different
Yeah, he
jobs
looks
within a
really
shot shell.
blanched
Those can
today,
be to protect
Teresa.
the pellets, to keep them together as they travel, to provide some type of cushioning between those pellets and the powder. So they all have different various purposes
Cushioning.
inside that shot shell.
Very much like I cultivate an airy
Greer, did you
tone
bring
to
with you
my
some
quality of my
demonstrative
voice
items to kind
that
of
cushions
demonstrate
you from the
generically what
abrasive
you're talking
sound
about
of
in
the
the shot
hard
shell?
letters
Yes,
like
sir.
K
Can I see that real quick?
and
Yes, sir.
D. Oh, and he's got a little pouch. Check out the little pouch. Got some ammo in it. I think this guy is sensitive to people making fun of the South Carolina accent, and he cultivated the way that he speaks. Look at him. Look at Alec. Alec, you snake in the grass. You are a snake and you know it, buddy. He's going, I wonder if I could grab that and swallow it before they could stop me. If it's inside me, they can't submit it to evidence, can they? Look at him. He's going, would somebody shut that woman up? I see you, Alex. You don't scare me.
All right. Mr. Greer, if you would.
'Cause
please
you're
read the
locked
shot
up, I'm
shells.
not.
You brought some demonstrative exhibits, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct, sir.
If
I
you would just
brought
please
some
hold them up, show them to the jury and explain
demonstrative
what it is we see
exhibits.
when what we're looking at and what the components are in there.
Now, please, no one be
Again,
afraid.
these are just two examples of a shot shell.
I have full
Here you have a
control of the shot
plastic,
shells.
body there of the shell with a metal head. On this end of it, that is the end that's going to be up against the breech face of the firearm. And in the middle, you'll see a small circle. That's the primer area,
There's
and
a
that's what's
small
going to be
circle
struck
here.
by a
This is
firing
the
pin in the
primer.
firearm
This
so
is
that,
where the
it
firing
will
pin
fire.
will
That's what's going to
strike
detonate
before the
inside the shot
explosion
shell to cause it
occurs.
to be fired. Out
If you
this
look
end,
on
you
each
see a
side
screen
of the
film on this
aircraft,
end.
you'll notice
This is
that
the
there
end
are
that the,
exits to the
projectiles
left
or the
and to
pellets
the
that are
right.
inside
If
of
you're
the shot
sitting in
shell
either one
will
of those
exit and travel,
aisles,
down
please
the
make
barrel
sure
of
you're in
that shotgun.
proper physical condition to help
you.
other passengers safely exit the airplane
All right,
in
Mr.
the
Greer, the second firearm.
in the event of an
If you
emergency.
would, talk about a little bit about what the AR platform is.
Sure. An AR platform is something that is commonly seen throughout America.
You think they got the Rona?
Originally, it was designed by Armalite, and it's just a modular
Armalite?
platform. And it's a rifle.
I know it sounds like a
semi-automatic
delightful
rifle in
French
its
dessert,
normal
but
state, and that's
actually,
what we have
it's a
here today.
well-known name in the savage destruction
And what would be
with
the more
aircraft
common caliber that
ammunition.
you might find on the AR platform?
Yes, sir. Typically, what is very common.
Oh,
we
that
see
was
in the
terrible,
laboratory
Teresa.
and that you may be more
That
familiar
judge
with,
has earned
is
a
its,
special
chambered
place in
223
hell
Remington
having to
caliber
deal with
5.56
Darnell
NATO.
Brooks.
That is a very common caliber for an AR-15 type firearm.
And what were some of the items that you examined in this case as far as rifle calibers?
In this case, I received one rifle, and it was chambered in 300 blackout caliber.
All right, explain to us what the 300 blackout round is and maybe how it's similar and different from a 5.56 round NATO.
Sure.
He kind of looks like
again,
he could have been in Gone with
you
the
may be
Wind
familiar
or
with the
some kind of
223
like
Remington or 5.56
old South
NATO
movie,
caliber.
right? You could see him with the
300
heavy
blackout,
sideburns.
cartridge is sort of similar to that. When that was designed, it was designed so that it could be used with a lot of the original features of an AR-15. So the overall dimensions of those cartridges are very similar, with the exception of a shorter case length and a much
I've
heavier
wondered
or
about
larger
that,
bullet.
DJ.
And 300 blackout being a relatively, at least compared to 5.56 NATO round, were some of the components interchangeable on the AR platform?
It's my understanding that when that 300 blackout caliber
It was
developed,
timely, Shalimar.
it
It's
was
like he knew I was
designed so
making
that some
fun of
the
him, huh?
components from the original AR-15 type that were chambered in the 5.56 NATO or the 223 Remington could be used with a 300 blackout.
Oh, he
And it
could
is
do
possible,
Romeo.
maybe not ideal, but
Yeah,
possible
Teresa.
to use a magazine that would be formatted for the 223 5.56 round in a 300 blackout rifle.
Yes, sir, I
Right,
would say it's
Alma?
possible.
It's pretty. It's very strange.
And did you bring any 223 and 5.56 and 300 blackout rounds with you today for demonstrative purposes?
Yes, sir. I have two.
All right, if you please identify the two and tell us what we're looking at and what the similarities and differences would be.
Sure. To start off, this is an example of a 223 Remington. This is the one that you may be more familiar with. I will show you now, side by side, this is the 300 blackout. And I'm trying to do this so you can see. You can see that their overall dimensions there are a little larger. They're about the same, with the exception of the larger bullet. And I'll give you a little bit of anatomy here of the cartridge. What we would refer to as
Now he's smiling. This
item
man
right here
loves
is an
ammunition,
unfired
okay?
cartridge.
I'm just saying.
Terminology in our firearms department is very key to us in being accurate in what we do. So we would refer to this as an unfired cartridge. That contains a bullet, which is this portion right here, this copper-colored projectile, and that's what's going to travel down the barrel of the firearm towards the target.
Hi,
Again,
Chanel.
on this
How are
end,
you?
Just like the shot shell, there's a primer there in the middle. You see the circle object there, and that's what the firing pin is going to strike, so that way it can detonate and cause the cartridge to be fired. When it's fired,
Oh, I don't
we will
think it
have the
sounds
cartridge
feminine at
case,
all.
which is just the brass-colored
You think it's
portion here.
feminine? I
And
don't
that is the
think it sounds
cylindrical
feminine. I think
component
it's
there that
really
holds it all
relaxing
together.
and calming.
It holds the primer, the bullet, and the gunpowder
And it's just
inside
that
of it.
South Carolina accent. It's just really common for
For
them.
demonstrative purposes, I'm going to put it on the helmet.
He's like, man, my mouth is tired talking like that. I can't wait to get out here and just talk normal like I do. Oh my God, Alex is looking bad today. Look at him. He looks like he's going to fall over dead. I wonder if he's got the Rona.
Yes, sir, I can see that.
You think he's got the Rona?
This is not going to work.
And look at the prosecution. They're laughing, making
right, can you see them clearly?
jokes. They're having a good
yes, sir,
time.
I can.
What's the big
Yeah,
black thing on the
genteel. Correct, DJ.
Appears to be a phone.
In your expertise,
That was
that's
perfect.
the two rounds we see there, the top round, can you identify which one that is?
The one that is up against the foam there would be the 300 blackout caliber cartridge.
And then, as you said before, the
He loves ammunition, doesn't he? I want to show y'all something that's a perfect juxtaposition. I think it's a little bit past
Can you see them
this.
clearly?
Hold on.
Yes, sir, I can.
All right. What's the big black thing on the screen?
Okay. I want you to look really closely. This will tell you everything you need to know. I want you to look at Alex here. And then I want you to look at the prosecution. Well, just a question here, people. Who do you think is winning? Who's winning? Put your answer in the chat. Yeah, he definitely has been found out. We're all here for you, Alex. What do you think? Who's here? I mean, not who's here. Who's winning? Would it be the very jovial prosecutor? Or would it be the man who is painted his face white and is staring off into the abyss as it stares back at him? What do you think? The DA's winning? Who's winning? Y'all tell me. I think most definitely has some money stashed away. He won't be using it though. Prosecution. 2 people for prosecution. 1 smiling, 1. Yeah, he looks sick to me. He doesn't look worried. He looks sick.
Prosecutors, prosecution. Us, because we're not in his predicament. We're winning, Alma, because we get to just sit in the comfort of our cushy little homes and make jokes and have fun, right? Winning. It always pays off to not break the law. Correct? Life's much easier for law-abiding citizens. My hubs too, he spouts off every brand he sees in movies. I kind of love that the defense won the first few days, gave this POS a modicum of hope that prosecution has swiftly pulled back with a smile. Very, very good point, Hybrid. Buster will use it. Yeah, I think that was the whole point, right? For him to round up as much Buster money as he could. And then when he got as much Buster money hidden away in a safe place, I mean, he could have bought physical gold. That would have been one avenue. You buy physical gold and silver, put it in a jar, plant it out in the woods somewhere, and then tell Buster where to go dig it up. That's one way to do it. And then I think maybe it was going to be a murder-suicide. Maybe he said, I'll get as much money for the firstborn, try to give him a hope, a new shot at life, and then me and the guy that caused all this, Paul, I'm not saying Paul really did, I'm saying in his weird, creepy little mind, I can see him doing that because he's incapable of accepting responsibility for his own behavior. So, in some way, I think maybe he could have held Paul and Maggie, responsible, saying it was their fault, that if Paul hadn't killed that girl, none of this would have happened. I could see him saying that.
It appears to be a phone.
In your expertise, that's a fact. The two rounds we see there, the top round, can you identify which one that is?
The one that is up against the phone there would be the 300 blackout caliber cartridge.
And then, as you said before, the round below that would be the 223/556 round.
Yes, sir.
And seeing the actual projectile, meaning the item that exits the barrel of the rifle, would that be that tip, the cylindrical tip on the top?
Yes, sir. And I believe, if I remember correctly, both of those projectiles were copper in color, if you can distinguish that on the screen.
And I don't know if you mentioned it, but I'll ask, as compared to each other, does the 300 blackout have a higher grain typically than the 5.56?
It's possible. The bullets come in different grain weights, so that is a much larger bullet, so I would expect it to be heavier.
And when we are going to hear about grain weights, could you explain what that means also?
Sure. Grain is a term that we use in firearms, and it's just a unit of measurement. So when we measure our projectiles, we are going to measure those in grains. And just as a common way to relate to that, if you imagine 7,000 grains, that's equivalent to approximately a pound.
Thank you.
Thank you for that,
Measurements
sir.
and bullets are done in grains, basically.
Yes, sir. That's what we refer
And
to.
a pound of bullets
Going back to
would be
shotgun shells very
7,000
briefly,
grains.
are there various types of shotgun shells and gauges or calibers?
Yes, sir, there are.
Could you explain a couple of the types that you might commonly find, and then just some of the calibers so we know what we're talking about?
Sure. Some of the more common gauges in shot shell, and gauge is just referring to the size and how we are able to determine what that firearm's chambered in. So a 12 gauge is something that's very common. That's a very common shotgun that I would expect to encounter. You may also have heard of or be familiar with a 20 gauge. That's another one that may be common, or 410 bore, which is a type of shot shell as well. Those are some of the more common ones that we would see in our laboratory setting and that you may be familiar with. Again, throughout those, there are all different kinds of shot shells loaded with different projectiles, loaded with birdshot, loaded with buckshot, and they all
Or
serve a
kinder,
purpose
gentler
within,
bullets
within
that
our
the
own respect.
government wants to use.
Those can have multiple projectiles, hundreds of projectiles. It could have just one large projectile, which we refer to as a slug. So there's lots of options, if you will, within a shot shell.
And although this may be obvious, a buckshot is typically used to hunt what type of game?
Buck.
I'm not
Deer.
hunting often, but I would
Deers.
expect a buckshot could be used for something, as it suggests.
Hey,
a buck.
Elroy.
You would expect maybe a
Let's
larger
go
animal.
shoot some
Again,
deers.
I'm not a hunter, but that's where I could imagine that.
Oh, he's not a hunter. He's
Thank
a,
you, Mr.
he's
Greer.
a
Before we
nice
move on,
guy.
and speaking about the area of forensic science of firearm examinations, is that an area that is subject to peer review?
Yes, sir.
And could you explain to us what that means? What's the peer review process and why that's important in forensic science?
Sure. Within firearms and tool mark examination, this is something that's been around for years. Firearms examiners have been
Oh, my
learning
God,
about
I'm so-
the firearms identification process,
can't
building
stand this.
studies and designs and experiments throughout many years. And as part of that process in designing those studies and doing this research within Firearm and Tool Mark, they're going to draft an experiment, conduct an experiment.
Chipmunks.
Publish
Yes.
an article on their findings.
Chipmunks. How
and
could I
during that
forget
process,
chipmunk shot?
There can be review, and there will be review of the article of the experiment, where other scientists within our field or other scientists
Shalimar,
or
that
researchers
was
can examine that and
nice.
see what was going
I
on
like
during that
this
process
guy.
and say whether
Y'all
they
are being
agree with
harsh,
it,
man.
and share their comments, and that's part of that peer review process. We,
Are
as
you
an
all the
ACCU
way in the
member, have
back,
access
Queen
to
of
our ACCU
Hearts?
Journal, where a lot of those peer review articles are published, and they're able for other examiners to look at, for other scientists and researchers
I
to
really
look
like
at
this witness.
and-
Y'all are not being nice.
and help bolster or their opinions and thoughts on.
Now we don't know
on
what you were voting for. One.
And personally,
I
do
vote
you know how many
one.
exams
I vote
you've
two.
done, you've conducted?
I do not have a number of examinations that I've conducted while at SLED. However, at
sir.
this point, I would say it's somewhere in the thousands.
Ooh, big number. You need a
Mr. Greer, I'm
spreadsheet.
going
You
to
need
ask,
Excel.
did you receive a volume of items
Thank God,
concerning this case
Teresa.
for review?
Yes, sir. I did receive several items to
I'm sorry,
examine
hold on.
in this case.
And generally, did you have an opportunity, we're going to go through those items very shortly, but did you have an opportunity to, in general, review a significant amount of items for identification, possible identification?
Yes, sir.
I'd be proud to be a
prepare
rebel
report
cause South's gonna
after,
do it again
conducting these
and
examinations.
again.
Yes, sir. I did prepare a report.
All right, I'm going to ask us if we would go through a number of items very shortly. Do you have a copy report, and is it needed in order to refresh your memory and be able to specifically recall each individual
You
item?
ain't good
Yes, sir, I
looking,
do have
but
a
you
copy,
can
and,
play.
I
And there's
would appreciate
ZZ
being able to
Top,
refer
and
to
you
it.
can't
very good.
forget.
And
Oh,
prior to your
brother
testimony
Will's
today, have you had an
been
opportunity
soaking
to,
wet.
well, first of all,
People
generally when
down
items are
Georgia
submitted,
come
do you know
from
anything
near
about
and
the case?
far to hear Ricky
Generally, when
Bass
items
picking
are
on that
submitted to the
red
SLED
guitar.
laboratory,
So get around,
I do not have information about
get
the
around,
case. I
children,
do not.
get down.
Prior to today's testimony, have you familiarized yourself, at least very briefly,
I was
with the
back
layout
on
of
the
the scene of the
housekeeper.
crime?
I voted
Yes, sir, I
that
have.
AM
And
is a
what-
disgusting
specifically
person,
paying
and
attention
he
to what
is
on
Queen
that
of
crime
Hearts.
scene layout?
We definitely were in the winners.
I reviewed a crime scene layout
Column.
in relation to where some of the marker numbers were that are listed in my report. Those just reference numbers, and I reviewed where those were in relation to the crime scene the evening where the two bodies were.
And is that just to assist us when we reference item number X, Y, or 1, 2, or 3? It allows us to then, you then to testify as where that was located.
Yes, sir, I can.
All right, Agent Greer, I'm going to go down the list of items, and I'd like you to identify the item that
Why
was
the long
received
face,
for me,
Alec?
beginning with item numbers 2 through 5. Slide item 2 through 5?
Yes, sir.
Your items 2 through 5? Did you conduct a review of that item?
Yes, sir, I did look at SLED items 2 through 5.
And while I find those items, if you would, please explain how you receive items in general, how you receive items in the lab, what the condition is before you review them, and then what you do ultimately with that item.
Correct, yes, sir. So as items are submitted to the SLED laboratory, those can come from agencies all over the state, to include our own SLED crime scene department. Those items are given assignments for multiple departments, depending on what the requesting agency is asking to have completed. We are a full-service
thank you,
laboratory,
Alma.
so sometimes the evidence has to travel through to other departments before it arrives
Well,
to me in the Firearms department.
I do admit to having
Typically,
ADHD.
if you want something like latent prints or DNA to be processed on those items, it would go there first, because when I get the item, I may decontaminate it or touch it, and those prints or DNA may not be relevant anymore, because you would find me on it. Evidence travels
That
throughout
was
the
cute.
laboratory to those departments and through our evidence control department. I receive those items either from those analysts or from our evidence control technicians. And when I receive that item and before I begin my examination, I want to make sure that the item is submitted to me in a manner that I can tell that it's not been tampered with. So we use a lot of heat-sealed pouches, so I'll make sure those are sealed, or our cardboard box that it's sealed up, and I can tell that there's either evidence tape or initials of that sealing examiner prior to me, so that way the evidence has been preserved in a manner that I know no one has altered with it.
And just so we're clear, thank you, Mr. Greer.
I
Just so we're
think that
clear, when
boy's
I
gonna
refer
be
to
a,
items, sometimes I'll
professor
say
one day.
items too. Does that refer to the items that you
He's a
received
good
them
teacher.
as a SLED designation?
Yes, sir. One other thing about the SLED laboratory, when evidence is submitted to the lab, it receives its own unique lab number that's specific to our laboratory, and it also receives new item numbers, and that's so we can track it throughout the laboratory, and our analysts throughout the lab can report and identify those clearly.
Thank you, Mr. Greer. I'm going to hand you what's been entered into evidence already as States Exhibits 63
Do y'all think
through
the defense is going to follow up, or do you think they're going to let it
I
stay?
believe
No
they correlate
questions.
to items
No questions for
7
this
on your
gentleman.
report. Would you please take a moment to look at these items? And I'm also looking for my heat seal pouch, and this is how I packaged the evidence after I examined it. So I'm just confirming that I see some of the information on these items.
I think he's going to be a professor one day, y'all.
Yes, sir. This appears to be what was submitted to the SLED laboratory as items 2 through 7 in your States Exhibits 63 through 68.
Thank you. And did you have an opportunity, I'll take those from you. Did you have an opportunity to examine these items?
Yes, sir, I did.
If you would, please tell us what your findings were for these items.
I determined that each of those items, they were all fired S&B heads.
Your Honor, I'm renewing my prior objection to the opinion testimony based upon the hearing we had, if it's for the record.
Yes, sir. You may continue.
I determined that each of those were one fired S&B head stamp 300 blackout caliber cartridge case, and that was items 2 through 7. That's what each of those items were.
Mr. Greer, and the item on the screen in front of you would be what's marked as States Exhibit 63. Is that representative of the collection of items that you reviewed in that batch?
Yes, sir.
All right. During your blackout round, were you able to see the head stamp on it? And I can give you back one of the items if you would. Were you able to identify the head stamp and who the manufacturer of that round was?
Yes, sir, I was.
All right, who was that?
The manufacturer of items 2 through 7 was Cellier and Belleau, and you may hear that referred to as S&B.
300?
Yes, sir, and head stamp 300 blackout.
All right, Mr. Greer, I'm handing you what's been marked and entered into evidence already as States Exhibits 33 and 34. want to see this. 33 and 34, which I believe correlate to 9 and 10 on your report. Would you please take a look at these items and let me know if you recognize them? Yes, sir, I do. Okay, and please tell us what they are.
SLED item 9, which is State's Exhibit 34, is a fired federal premium double-aught buck 3-inch Magnum shot shell. And SLED item 10, which is State's Exhibit 33, is one fired Winchester Drylock number 2 12-gauge shot shell.
And after your review of the scene, where were items, your items 2 through 7 located?
After reviewing the crime scene diagram, I was aware of the marker numbers that those were recovered from, and then reviewing that diagram, it's my understanding that those items 2 through 7, the 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases, were located around or near the body of Margaret Murdaugh.
All right, and I'm referring now to your items 9 and 10, States 33 and 34. Where were those after your review of the crime scene diagram? Where were those identified and retrieved from?
Those appear to be in or around the storage room area near the kennels.
Thank you. I'm putting these two up on the screen. Mr. Greer, are these the items you just testified to having examined?
Yes, sir, they are.
Okay, thank you. Now, right now, we're identifying a number of items. Is it, would it be fair to say that we're going to go over your results?
I need to take a little break here. Just hold on one second. I've got a public service announcement. For the one lone little lost troll in the channel, you should probably go back to your own channel because you don't fit in here. Mostly because we smile and have fun here.
Yes, sir, we can.
All right, referring to item State's Exhibit number 4, your item number 22, would you please direct your attention to that?
Yes, sir.
Congratulations, See My Tutu. That's awesome. That's a very interesting job. Oh, look, miraculously, she left. She went back to her, I guess she went back to her channel because she was afraid I was about to call out her channel. Yeah, you know who it was, Diane.
All right, I'm handing you what's been marked, Jim.
Man, Alex looks bad, doesn't he? Look at him. He looks terrible
and entered into
today.
evidence of State's Exhibit 4. Please take a look at this file and entered into evidence.
He is, look at, he's scared, isn't he?
And entered into evidence of
Okay,
State's
what do y'all
Exhibit.
think? Do y'all think that's fear?
4.
Are we looking at
You're
fear?
familiar with it?
You think he's a drug? Hey, Big Ups, welcome. You think it's
Ladies and gentlemen,
anger?
this firearm is
He's-
unloaded. It's safe for me to handle.
Sundown
I will keep
Farm
it
says he's
pointed in
sweating bullets.
A safe direction here. I'm going to look for some of those identifying
knows
marks
he's
that
done.
I've placed on this shotgun. Yes, sir, I do recognize this shotgun.
All right, tell us what that gun is.
This shotgun was determined to be one Benelli Model Super Black Eagle 3 semi-automatic shotgun in 12 gauge with a serial number of
Burnt toast.
U573210E17.
Thank you.
Do you think we're going to get another bombshell today? You think this is it?
Was there anything that accompanied State's Exhibit number 4?
Yes, sir. Also submitted with that firearm was an accessory, which was the sling, and one unfired Federal Premium Double-Aught Buck 3-inch 12-gauge shot shell, and one unfired Winchester Super X Game Load 16-gauge.
I think
shot
that is
shell.
the murder weapon.
Now, I think you just testified that 12 gauge, this shotgun is what gauge?
That is 12-gauge shotgun.
Boom.
And I think you just
Cannon.
mentioned that loaded in it was a 16 gauge. Could you explain what the process was ejecting? Is that the proper gauge for that shotgun?
No, sir. That the unfired ammunition, as it was submitted to me, was received in another package. I did not remove it from that firearm. However, a 16 gauge would not be correct for use in that firearm.
Did you have to manually remove it from the shotgun?
It was already removed when I received it.
Gun or two guns is missing. He murdered the family. Ammunition will match
Meaning
up.
what's been marked
Some of that home
as states and entered into evidence as States Exhibit 250, sled item 8. Item 8, slide item 8, but states item 250. Take a moment to review it and let me know if you are aware of what it is.
That's true, DJO.
Yes, sir. I recognize this as sled item 8.
Did you have an opportunity to examine and review that item?
I did.
What did you determine it was or is?
Sled item 8, States Exhibit number 250, was determined to be one fired bullet, and that was listed as a near tire impression at marker 8.
And you were able to do further analysis, which will get you the results to determine its weight?
Yes, sir.
Very good. So as you testified before, this would be the bullet minus the casing that
I
it originally
agree, big
came.
ups.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is just one fired bullet.
And that's what it looks like when it doesn't have the back part on it?
Yes, sir. That's just a bullet without any cartridge case attached to it.
All right, Mr. Greer, I'm going to direct your attention to States Exhibit number 20. slide
Teresa,
item
it is
14.
so much information in this case. It's crazy.
This is entered into evidence already. I'm going to hand it to you. Then ask if you conducted an exam of this item.
I'll be right back.
Yes, sir. I did.
All right, what are the results?
Sled item 14, which is States Exhibit 20, was determined to be 24 birdshot pellets listed as from dog food storage room.
And can you repeat it for my purposes? These were pellets from what?
Yes, sir. 24 birdshot pellets listed as from dog food storage room.
You testified before and you presented what a shotgun shell looks like. Would that be what's inside a shotgun shell ultimately?
Yes, sir. That would be an example of birdshot pellets that would be loaded into a shotgun shell.
All right, Mr. Greer, I'm going to direct your attention attention to what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 76, sled item number 12. You have an opportunity. Did you have an opportunity to review this item after you take a look at it?
Yes, sir.
All right, tell us what it is, please.
Sled item 12, State's Exhibit 76, was determined to be one fired bullet listed as from bedding inside doghouse.
I'm going to direct your attention to State's Exhibit 102, sled item 11. Already entered in evidence. Please take a look at this item. Let me know if you're familiar with its contents.
Yes, sir. This is sled item 11, State's Exhibit 102, and that was determined to be one fired bullet jacket fragment, 3 bullet jacket fragments, and 1 piece of lead, listed as defect in ground gravel marker 13.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to refer to what's been identified as State's Exhibit 109. Sled item 137. Please review this item and let me know if you recognize it and if you performed an examination of it.
Yes, sir. This is sled item 137, State's Exhibit 109, and it was determined to be 1 piece of lead listed as from hair on the item 92 dress.
At this point, State would move for 109 to be admitted into evidence. Moving on to State's Exhibit 110, which is sled items 67 and 68. I'll direct your attention to that. They've been marked as, for identification purposes, as State's item 110.
No objection.
All right, Mr. Greer, I'm going to show you what's been admitted as evidence as 110. If you would, please take a look at it. Let me know if you've recognized it and performed an examination on it.
Yes, sir. State's Exhibit 110 represents 2 sled items. Sled item 67, which I examined, determined to be 48 birdshot pellets listed as from left shoulder and head of Paul Murdaugh at autopsy. And sled item 68 was 1 piece of plastic listed as from left shoulder and head of Paul Murdaugh at autopsy.
When you say where it's from, that's because that's what was identified on the item when it was submitted to you for review?
Yes, sir. That's solely based on how it was logged into our system by the submitting personnel.
All right, I'm going to refer your attention now to 3 items, just to speed along the process a little bit. States 111, 112, and 113 marked as identification purposes. Sled item 69, 66, and 104. So if you please take a look at those and your items in your report, I'll be right with you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break for lunch. We will resume in 1 hour and 15 minutes, 2:45.
All right.
All right, everybody. I have a meeting at 1 o'clock, and so I'm going to go and do my meeting. And it looks like they're now in recess, probably lunch. And so I'll be back later. Okay? When they start back up, I should be finished with my meeting, so the timing should be perfect. Yeah, the reporting is a bit different. The bottom line, the banker was on the stand and presented what would be principal money, like the actual cash that he owed the bank in terms of what they loaned out. Now that did not include charge-offs, and he did have a couple of million in charge-offs. Charged off loans, and it did not include like fees and penalties and that kind of thing. So, you know, when they say 8 million or 12 million, you got to be careful because you don't know if they're talking about the original amount they loaned. I had a breakdown of the loans. Teresa probably has the breakdown too. Now the uncharged off, the ones that were active, 104,000. Another one was $800,006, $806,666, 195,171. Another one was $999,650. And listen to this, it's a line of credit. $1 million line of credit that he had maxed out. He had another outstanding loan, $91,361. And then so that was about $2.6 million in active loans. But there were a couple of million that were charged off. But his accounts, this is so funny. His farm account was a negative $2,458. And then he had a account 6092 that was $2,185. He had a health savings account which was $7,540. He had another 6649 and it was $62,000. And then Maggie's account had $3,900. These were just the accounts at Palmetto. You also have to distinguish. These were Palmetto accounts, okay? He had many accounts, multiple accounts at Bank of America, and that's where he was actually stealing the money of the beneficiaries. Okay, so I know that didn't exactly directly answer, but he's millions of dollars in the hole. Those numbers I gave you was the pure amount of what the bank gave to Alec Murdaugh. It did not include interest. It didn't include fees. It didn't include penalties. So, you know, it's jaw-dropping is what it is. It's jaw-dropping that this Lafitte family let him do this. It's jaw-dropping that a guy that was in arrears on checking accounts, who had so many charged off loans that he was not paying, that they let him open up $1 million line of credit. It's just it's just incredible. It's absolutely incredible. All right, I got to go. I got a meeting in a few minutes, and then I'll be back as soon as they start off this afternoon. If you don't mind, please do a thumbs up before you leave to kind of help with the algorithm, and then, you know, I'll be back. Y'all have a good lunch. Bye.